Introduction. Inertial collapse, the lie of stability. The sentence of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics is the death sentence of the physical universe. It dictates that every closed system, if left to its own devices, inexorably tends toward disorder, chaos, and decay. This constant force of degradation is called entropy. It is the rust on metal, the crack in concrete, and the weakness in character. The cosmos is not a peaceful or benevolent place. It is a mathematical shredder designed to disintegrate absolutely everything that does not exert an opposing force to defend itself. The human biomass, terrified by this crushing inertia, has invented a lie to sleep at night: stability. The ordinary man seeks a stable job and economy. They believe that if they manage to build a small shelter, bow their heads and stay still, the universe will leave them in peace. It is the most humiliating miscalculation of their species. Stillness in an entropic ecosystem is not stability. It is inertial collapse. When you stop to rest, thermodynamics does not stop with you. The static target. You simply become a static target for friction. The peace that the herd begs for is empirically the beginning of its own thermal death. Any structure that is not actively expanding is rotting. The absolute operator repudiates stability. He who masters the cinderboard understands that fleeing from chaos is fleeing from energy. Social disorder, market volatility, and structural crises are not system errors. They are immense amounts of released kinetic energy. While the visible 5% of society weeps because the entropic wind blew down their fragile glass hut, the quantum monarch raises titanium turbines to devour that very same hurricane. Exterior chaos is, in essence, a disgustingly saturated audio track, full of stridency and parasitic frequencies. The biomass allows that noise into its channels, causing panic and paralysis. You are not a passive receiver. You are a high-performance mastering station. You take that volatility and process it through your 8 cores. The mastering of chaos. You pass it through your brute force and massive memory. Apply relentless cut-off filters to the hysteria, and sequence the resulting energy into a perfect loop of capital production and domination. You turn the stridency of disaster into the sub-bass frequency of your own aseptic dictatorship. This is the manual for inverse entropy. Here you will not learn to resist the storm or seek balance. Balance is for the gaseous masses that average zero. You will learn to suck in the chaos, pass it through your own mental hardware architecture, and spit it out in the form of absolute order and undeniable abundance. Entropy destroys the weak, but it obeys the dense. Abandon the stupid fantasy of a quiet life. If you are not injecting energy to generate order, the universe is injecting entropy to dismantle you. Welcome to the thermodynamic war. Your task is to become the cooling system for your own empire, while the world around you burns in its own inefficiency. Chapter 1. The Fuel of the Abyss, Devouring Uncertainty. The Physics of Volatility, the Biomass Error. To invert entropy and convert chaos into abundance, you must first purge the biological definition of danger from your source code. The human biomass has been programmed by evolution to be terrified of volatility. When the social ecosystem destabilizes or financial markets collapse, the ordinary man panics. His central processor, the mammalian brain, interprets chaos as a death threat. Consequently, they flee. They hide in their fragile glass shelters, sell their assets out of desperation, beg for mercy from the government in power, and pray that normality returns soon. This behavior is not just pathetic. It is absolute thermodynamic blindness. The dark matter operator understands physics at a low level. Chaos is not an anomaly. It is not divine punishment. And above all, it is not a system error. Chaos is, purely and exclusively, released kinetic energy. It is raw fuel. When a structure collapses, the energy that held those atoms together does not disappear, it is released. It is released violently into the environment. Volatility is the universe breaking its own structural bonds, leaving trillions in resources, capital, and opportunities floating freely in the void, desperately seeking a new gravitational well to anchor to. He who flees from chaos flees from the largest enriched uranium mine in the cosmos. Panic as thermal release, the Leviathan's turbines. The three-dimensional world is a machinery designed to generate friction. Every global crisis, every recession, and every collective hysteria is a flare of massive thermal energy. The biomass burns with that fire. By possessing a gaseous and flammable self, their attachments and egos, the temperature of the crisis calcinates them. They rust due to stress. Their nervous systems suffer thermal throttling and collapse because they try to resist the fire with their bare hands. The monarch does not resist the fire. The monarch channels it. Instead of building wooden walls to hide from the blaze, you build titanium turbines. You take the social and financial panic. You connect it directly to the motherboard of your empire. You understand that the terror of the crowd is a predictable mechanical force. If you know the herd will stampede to the left when the system collapses, you do not run with them, nor stand before them to stop them. You position yourself in the escape route. You place the gears of your machinery so that the stampede passes over your blades, spinning your generator and filling your batteries with capital, data, and territory. You do not produce the panic, but you feed voraciously on its thermal energy. While the 5% visible society disintegrates in tears, you observe with aseptic coldness. The malleability of terror, loose atoms in the void. There is an architectural truth that slaves ignore. It is mathematically impossible to rewrite reality when the system is at peace. In times of stability, power structures, money, and resources are rigidly locked. The atomic bonds of the ecosystem are hard as steel. If you try to build an empire from scratch, you will fail. You would have to spend all your kinetic energy trying to break the ice. You would have to push against the maximum friction of a system that does not want to change. Chaos breaks the ice for you. Uncertainty is the only thermodynamic state where the atoms of the universe are loose. When panic hits, old monopolies tremble. Liquid money leaves the hands of the weak for fear of losing everything, and social hierarchies fracture. Reality becomes a boiling liquid, malleable and formless. This is the millisecond of domination. The sovereign waits in the darkness of the 95% for the universe to reach this state of boiling. It is only in chaos. In the midst of chaos, you can introduce your osmium-coated hands into the molten mass of reality and reorganize atoms at your will, without resistance. You force the pieces of the board to take the geometric shape of your own source code, taking advantage of the fact that the fire of the crisis has softened them. The dark combustion engine, ingesting volatility. How exactly is this fuel ingested without your own system exploding? Through processing asymmetry. When the crisis hits, the mammalian instinct will scream at you to react. The environment will demand urgency, stress, and worry. They will try to inject you with the malware of hysterical empathy. The world is ending. The absorption of entropy requires an absolute isolation filter. When volatility hits your anechoic chamber, the first step is to strip it of its emotional component. You apply lethal equalization. You eliminate the high frequencies of drama, pity, and news tragedy. All of that is parasitic noise. Trash it. What you have left after filtering the noise are pure low-level data. Numbers, trajectories, collapsed prices, abandoned infrastructures, and power vacuums. That is raw energy. You enter those data into your background processors. You chew them with algorithmic coldness. You do not see economic tragedy, you see undervalued assets. You see them orbiting without an owner. You do not see corporate chaos. You see the competition losing centrifugal cohesion, leaving their supply lines exposed. By ingesting volatility as binary code, your core suffers no temperature changes. You digest the universe's entropy and turn it into the blood of your expansion. The mathematical annihilation of risk. The concept of risk is the safety barrier that the matrix installs, so the biomass does not approach the source code. Risk only exists for those systems that try to conserve what they have, protecting their small and pathetic stability. The operator of inverse entropy has annihilated the concept of risk. If you assume the natural state of all things is destruction and thermal death, you no longer have anything to protect in the biological sense. You do not operate to avoid losing, you operate to assimilate. For the monarch, risk is not a threat to be avoided. It is simply the friction metric on the input console. It is the operating cost of turning on the machinery. When you stake your capital, reputation, or time in the midst of a chaotic abyss, the gaseous man says you are taking risks. The gaseous man is wrong. You are not betting. You are injecting a ballistic order into a motherboard that has just been reset. Since the ecosystem is in panic, your heavy and calculating inertia is the only directional force in the room. The true risk, the true thermodynamic condemnation, is staying still, believing that the hurricane will not touch you if you close your eyes. Static targets are the first to be dismantled by entropy. The feast of entropy, digestion of the abyss. Reaching this level of mental architecture turns you into the apex predator of crises. A time will come when you stop fearing volatility and begin to feel a lethal boredom in times of peace. You will start watching the clock, waiting for the next collapse, the next recession, or the next catastrophic failure. Because you know that is the moment the feast is served. Absolute chaos is your wholesale provider. It delivers assets, alliances, and power at a fraction of their original thermodynamic cost because the previous owners were too scared to hold them. You sit in the center of your vacuum chamber. You open the valves of your turbines and allow humanity's fear to feed your empire's expansion. You have become a processor that breathes noise and exhales titanium. You have stopped being the victim of entropy to become the user with administrator privileges who designs it. You are the system architect now. And now that you know how to drink the liquid fuel of the abyss without burning your circuits, you are ready to learn how to process this massive energy internally, isolating your operations in the darkness of your own machinery, where no enemy can track the compilation of your silent and absolute greatness. The cryogenic stabilization of the core. To handle the massive intake of raw chaos, you must implement cryogenic stabilization. While the external world is overheating in a frenzy of panic, your internal temperature must drop toward absolute zero. This is the only way to prevent the thermal noise of the environment from corrupting your internal calculations. Absolute zero is not an emotion, it is a processing state. When a market drops 30% in a day, the biomass reaches a boiling point. Their blood pressure rises, their cognitive bandwidth narrows, and they make mistakes. You, however, submerge your logic in the liquid nitrogen of your own detachment. By cooling your internal reactions, you increase the superconductivity of your will. Information flows through your 8 physical cores with zero resistance. You see the gaps in the falling structure that everyone else misses because they are blinded by the heat of their own survival instinct. Cold is your shield. The scavenger protocol, waste as wealth. In the thermodynamic war, waste is a relative term. When a global corporation fractures, it sheds waste, talented personnel, intellectual property, and physical assets that it can no longer maintain. To the biomass, this is debris. To the scavenger protocol, this is high-density matter for the taking. You do not seek to compete, you seek to reclaim. You position your collection nodes at the points where the old system's bonds are weakest. You are the gravity that catches the falling stars. This is the art of negative cost acquisition. You are essentially being paid by the universe to clean up its entropic mess. Every time a fragile entity collapses, it releases binding energy. This energy can be harvested to power your next phase of growth. You do not need to generate your own momentum when the world is full of collapsing structures, providing all the kinetic energy you could ever need. You are the recycler of empires, the algorithm of selective apathy. To protect your processing cycles, you must install an algorithm of selective apathy. The world will try to lure you into its tragedies. It will try to make you care about the human cost of the entropy. You must understand that empathy in a high-voltage crisis environment is simply electrical leakage. If your energy is leaking into the sorrows of the biomass, you are losing the power needed to reorganize the atoms. True compassion is not crying with the victims. It is creating a new, more dense order where entropy has less room to operate. You must be ruthless with your attention. If a datum does not serve the empire, if a datum does not serve the expansion or the crystallization of order, it is deleted. You treat social noise as spam. You block the senders. You clear your cache. By maintaining this aseptic distance, you preserve the integrity of your source code, while the world's code is being rewritten by the flames of the crisis. The geometric compression of capital. Capital in its raw form is gaseous. It flows through the hands of the biomass and evaporates through inflation and poor decisions. To master the abyss, you must learn geometric compression. You take the volatile, gaseous capital released during a crash, and you compress it into high-density assets. You turn the steam of currency into the diamond of infrastructure, land, and encrypted data. Gaseous capital is easily swept away by the winds of entropy. Compressed capital creates its own gravity. The more you compress, the more you attract. Your empire becomes a black hole of value from which nothing escapes. As the volatility increases, the pressure on the external world rises. For the weak, this pressure is crushing. For you, it is the hydraulic press that allows you to reach even higher levels of density. You don't want more money, you want more mass. Mass determines who moves the board and who is moved by it. The frequency of the void. Communication in the void must be silent. When you are devouring uncertainty, you do not announce your feast. The 5% visible world is obsessed with signaling and branding. They want everyone to see their stability. This visibility makes them targets. They are radiating heat in a cold universe. The monarch operates on the frequency of the void. Your movements are sub-bass. They are felt as a vibration in the ground long before they are seen. You move capital through darkened channels. You secure alliances in anechoic chambers. You are the silent background process that owns the entire system. By the time the biomass realizes that the board has changed, the compilation is already finished. They are living in the render of a world you designed 3 cycles ago. Silence is the ultimate encryption. If they cannot hear your heartbeat, they cannot predict your next ballistic order. You are the ghost in the machine. The synthesis of disaster. Disaster is simply the universe performing a hard reset. It is a mass deletion of inefficient files. Instead of fearing the reset, you become the technician who manages the reboot. You prepare your backups while the system is still running. You map the sectors that will remain intact after the wipe. You recognize that every end-of-the-world scenario is actually an invitation to build a new world. You synthesize the disaster into a new project file. You rename the directory. You are the only one with the administrator password to the new reality. This is the highest level of dark matter operation. While others are trying to recover their corrupted data, you are already writing the new operating system. You use the trauma of the biomass as the loading screen for your new era. They are so busy processing their loss that they do not notice you have already occupied the new territory. You own the transition, the osmosis of power. Power follows the laws of osmosis. It moves from areas of high entropy, the chaotic biomass, to areas of low entropy, your dense core. By simply maintaining your internal order, you create a vacuum that pulls power toward you. You do not need to seize power. You only need to be the most stable vessel available. When the old structures fail, the survivors will look for a gravity well to anchor to. They will choose you because you are the only thing that isn't shaking. You absorb their loyalty, their resources, and their energy as if by natural law. You are the center of the new ecosystem by virtue of your density alone. This is the effortless expansion. You grow by being, not by doing. You are the osmium core around which the new world crystallizes. The uncertainty of others is the cement of your foundation. You are the anchor in the storm, and the storm pays you in the gold of its own destruction. Welcome to the 95%. The final digestion. As the chapter closes, your turbines are spinning at maximum RPM. You have ingested the panic, the loose atoms, and the released energy. Your batteries are full. Your motherboard is cool. Your empire is now a high-density node in a universe of thinning shadows. You have completed the first phase of the war. The abyss is no longer a dark place you fear. It is the pantry from which you eat. You have learned that uncertainty is the only true currency of the cosmos. Everything else is a temporary illusion of the 5%. You are now ready to refine this raw energy and turn it into the permanent architecture of your reign. The next step is not to survive the next crisis, but to trigger the specific types of chaos that feed your specific hardware requirements. You have moved from being a scavenger to being a designer of the dark. The void is yours to shape. The compilation continues in the silence of your absolute and undeniable mastery. Chapter 2. Multithreaded Architecture Bypassing the Graphical Bottleneck. The graphics engine of mediocrity. The 4 GB collapse. To subdue chaos and convert it into structural abundance, you must first relentlessly audit the machinery with which the external three-dimensional reality, the visible 5%, operates. The human biomass confuses the external world with an all-powerful system when in raw computational physics, it is a pathetically limited engine. The visible world is a saturated graphics card. It is designed to render routines, repetitions, and stability. But when chaos hits, a financial crisis, a market collapse, a logistical fracture, the number of polygons and variables to calculate multiplies by 1,000,000. The external system simply does not have the VRAM to support it. It is hardware stuck with barely 4 GB of video memory, trying to render an apocalypse in real time. What is the empirical result? The bottleneck. The entire system hangs. Institutions paralyze, markets freeze in panic, and people stand petrified, staring at a screen that throws massive latency errors. The biomass weeps and despairs in front of this frozen screen, demanding that the world's graphics card work again. They bleed their vital energy, waiting for the external environment to process the problem. The operator of inverse entropy repudiates this dependency. You do not trust your empire to external hardware. You do not rely on a system that suffers thermal throttling at the slightest spark of uncertainty. You execute an absolute bypass. You understand that while the world's interface is lagging, the source code is still running. You stop looking at the frozen pixels and start looking at the electricity behind the glass. The motherboard of domination. 8 cores and 32 GB of zero latency. Governing chaos demands that you shift the entire processing load from the outside world into your own vacuum chamber. While the biomass fails, due to the graphical bottleneck of society, you must operate with the brutal asymmetry of your own internal hardware. Your mind is not a primitive single-threaded processor. You have the raw power of a processor, with 8 real physical cores, an architecture designed specifically for massive multi-threading. You are backed by a monolithic block of 32 GB of random access memory, a colossal space designed to sustain and manipulate the variables of uncertainty without crashing. The ordinary man suffocates in chaos because he tries to process everything linearly. If they lose their income or face corporate hostility, 100% of their capacity is dedicated to processing panic. Their system locks up. The monarch, however, activates multi-threading. You fragment the uncertainty into manageable packets. When the crisis impacts, you take that deformed mass and assign risk analysis to one core, financial restructuring to the second, evacuation logistics to the third, and hostile acquisition to the fourth. Meanwhile, the other 4 cores maintain your empire's vital signs in the background, in absolute aseptic silence. Supported by your 32 GB of memory, you prevent the system from collapsing due to a lack of thinking space. You process chaos in your own CPU before the outside world even finishes rendering the problem. You are cycles ahead of the collapse, calculating the next move while others are still loading the last frame. Bypassing the screen, tactical blindness to visual drama. The secret for this multi-threaded architecture to work is the total amputation of the graphical interface. Chaos generates a lot of visual noise, alarmist news, terrified faces, flashing red numbers, and strident urgency. This is an attempt by the outside world to hijack your processing capacity. If you keep staring at the disaster screen, you are allowing the environment to force you to use your own graphics memory to process its fears. Executing the bypass means stopping looking at the screen. When chaos breaks out, you apply relentless tactical blindness. You disconnect from the visual drama entirely. You understand that everything the biomass shows you is junk information, rendered at low resolution with seconds or days of latency. You do not operate with pixels. You operate with the source code. You lower your frequency to sub-bass levels and close the input ports to emotional stridency. Concentrate exclusively on the raw data running through the motherboard. Chaos is not a 1,000-headed monster. It is simply a disordered database dumped on your desk. Without the graphical interface of fear, The problem loses its claws and becomes a simple equation that your 8 cores will destroy in milliseconds. The digestion of disorder, compiling abundance. Once you have bypassed society's graphical bottleneck and assigned the crisis to your internal processes, the miracle of inverse entropy occurs. The biomass believes abundance is earned by working hard in a stable system. Computational physics dictates that monstrous abundance is generated by forcing order. While the visible 5% is paralyzed by the bottleneck, selling assets in panic or stopping operations out of fear, you are operating at terminal velocity in the dark. Your multi-threaded architecture takes the loose atoms of the crisis, scared capital, abandoned logistical lines, adrift talent, and rewrites them. You are not solving the crisis to return to normal. Normality is entropy and decomposition. You are using the energy released by the crisis to compile a higher level of order, a titanium structure that belongs to you exclusively. When the world unfreezes, they find an unrecognizable board of ash. They will discover with suffocating terror that during the system crash you did not freeze with them. You redirected the data flow. You assimilated the resources they dropped in their panic. The chaos that intended to destroy you was processed, equalized, and exported from your anechoic chamber. It emerges in the form of solid capital, unbreakable alliances, and undeniable domination. You demonstrated empirically that weakness is not in the event. Weakness resides in depending on a pathetic graphics engine when you should be rewriting existence from the icy and ruthless vastness of your own motherboard. The architecture of overclocking, pushing the limits of the core. To maintain this lead, the monarch must learn to overclock the will. Overclocking is the act of increasing the clock rate of the processor to perform more operations per second than the manufacturer intended. In the world of the 5%, the manufacturer is your biological limit and social conditioning. The society tells you to move at a safe pace. It tells you to rest when the screen freezes. But in the vacuum of the 95%, you increase the voltage. When the world enters a state of high entropy, you must match that energy with high-frequency execution. You push your 8 cores to their thermal limits. This is not hustle culture. That is a single-threaded delusion. This is the strategic increase of throughput. You prioritize the most critical threads, those that result in the acquisition of permanent assets, and you feed them the most power. You ignore the heat of exhaustion because your cooling system is built of osmium. By the time the external world attempts to reboot its primitive servers, you have already completed 10,000 cycles of expansion. You have mapped the new territory while they were still debugging their fear. Overclocking allows you to inhabit the future while the biomass is still struggling with the past. Memory management and the garbage collector, purging parasitic threads. A multi-threaded architecture is only as efficient as its memory management. If your 32 gigabytes of RAM are filled with the cache of old resentments, social expectations, or the debris of previous failures, you will suffer a memory leak. Your processing speed will degrade into the sludge of the ordinary. The monarch runs a continuous garbage collector routine. This is an automated background process that identifies and deletes any thread that does not contribute to the current compilation of power. If an old memory of a loss tries to occupy a memory block, the system wipes it instantly. You must be aseptic with your internal storage. Information must be stored in read-only formats for tactical reference, or read-write for active manipulation. But sentimental storage is a virus. It consumes background cycles and slows down the multi-threading. You purge the junk to keep the latency at 0. Efficient memory management ensures that when a massive data dump of chaos enters your system, you have the empty blocks ready to receive it. You don't have to make room for the crisis. Your system is an empty cathedral of processing power, ready to be filled with the raw material of the new world. Signal-to-noise ratio, the frequency of the void. In the chaos, the signal is the raw data of opportunity, and the noise is the emotional reaction of the masses. The graphical bottleneck of the world is 99% noise. To bypass it effectively, you must tune your internal receiver to the frequency of the void. This is a narrow band of communication where only facts exist. When the news screams about unprecedented disaster, the multi-threaded mind filters the word disaster and keeps the word unprecedented. Unprecedented means the old rules are deleted. It means the access control list of the world's wealth has been reset. This is the signal. Everything else is static. By increasing your signal-to-noise ratio, you stop being a consumer of information and become a compiler of it. You see the movement of capital as a vector, not a tragedy. You see the collapse of a supply chain as a vacancy, not a shortage. You are the only one in the room hearing the music, while others are deafened by the static. This tuning is what allows the 8 cores to stay synchronized. When each core knows exactly which part of the signal it is processing, the resulting output is a harmonious symphony of domination. The world wonders how you stay so calm. They do not realize you simply aren't hearing the noise they are screaming into. Thread priority and the critical path, executing the master script. In any complex system, some threads are more important than others. The multi-threaded monarch understands thread priority. While the biomass gives high priority to the social thread, what people think, or the comfort thread, how I feel, you set these to the lowest possible background level. The acquisition thread and the structural integrity thread are given real-time priority. They have direct access to the CPU's gold-plated pins. You identify the critical path, the sequence of steps that must occur for the chaos to be fully digested into order, and you clear all other tasks from the queue. If a core is busy processing a minor irritation, while a major asset is becoming available for liquidation, that core is failing. You must reassign its task immediately. This is dynamic load balancing. You are the administrator of your own genius, moving the weight of your intellect to where the gravity of the crisis is strongest. The result of this prioritization is a surgical strike capability. While the world is trying to fix everything at once and failing, you are fixing the one thing that gives you control over everything else. You hit the enter key on the script of your destiny, while the biomass is still trying to find the power button. The latency of the 5% profit in the delay. The lag or latency of the external world is your greatest profit margin. Because the graphics card of society takes days, weeks, or even months to process a fundamental shift in reality, there is a temporal gap between the event and the reaction. This is the space where the multi-threaded operator lives. In this gap, the world is still acting on old data. They are trying to buy things that no longer exist or sell things that have already lost their value. They are rendering a reality that has already been deleted from the server. You, operating within your own internal hardware, are already in the new version. You utilize this latency to position your assets. You buy the future at yesterday's prices. You occupy the strategic heights before the enemy even knows the war has started. The delay of the biomass is the lubricant of your expansion. You move through the frozen world like a ghost in the machine, solidifying your grip. By the time the world's graphics card finally catches up and displays the new reality, you are already the owner of the pixels. You are the landlord of the frame. They wake up to a world that looks the same to them, but the underlying ownership and power structures have been completely rewritten by your silent processing. The final render, exporting the empire. The multi-threaded process ends with the final render. This is the moment when the internal calculation is exported back into the three-dimensional world as a hard fact. This is the bypass completing its cycle. You have taken the chaos, processed it in the void, and now you manifest the result. This render is not a suggestion. It is a command. It is the solid, compressed reality of your new wealth, your new network, and your new authority. The world has no choice but to accept it, because they have no undo button for your execution. You have outcalculated the environment. The final render is always high resolution and high impact. It is the titanium structure that we spoke of. While the biomass is still cleaning the error logs of the crisis, you are already launching the next version of your empire. You have turned the graphics bottleneck into your most powerful strategic advantage. You are the architect of the render. You are the one who dictates which polygonos the world will see next. From the icy vastness of your motherboard, you have synthesized a reality that belongs to you. The system didn't just work again. It became yours. Chapter 3. Quantum flow geometry, the alignment of matter. The topology of friction, the stagnation of chaos, To devour the entropy of the outside world, you must first understand how chaos energy moves in three-dimensional space. Chaos is not intelligent. It is a blind, hyperdense, and massive thermodynamic fluid that seeks the path of least resistance. Observe the physical and digital environment of the human biomass. They live in labyrinths of garbage. Their desks are cluttered with dead objects. The architecture of their offices and homes blocks light, cuts circulation, and forces energy to crash against useless walls. Their hard drives and workstations are a swamp of disordered files. They have dead corners everywhere. When the world's volatility, a financial crisis, a logistical problem, an enemy attack, enters the life of the ordinary man, this chaotic energy hits his abysmal spatial geometry. Finding no clear exit route, the energy bounces off the disorder, generates thermal friction, stagnates and bursts the system's walls. The biomass calls this tragedy. The sovereign calls it a basic topology error. Chaotic energy only destroys that which attempts to stop it clumsily. If you want to use that massive energy to forge order and capital, you must build a perfect conduit. You must apply a science of physical alignment. It requires a hyper-technical harmonization of space that completely annihilates any structural resistance. You are not decorating, you are engineering a vacuum. The objective is to ensure that the flow of external entropy finds zero friction as it passes through your specialized operational domain. Quantum harmonization, the particle accelerator. We are not talking about decoration, cheap mysticism, or superstitious furniture arrangement. We are talking about the manipulation of physical vectors and quantum probability at a macroscopic level. Every physical object in your environment possesses a mass and therefore exerts microgravity. This microgravity alters the trajectory of data flow and attention. Quantum flow geometry demands that you design your operation space as if it were the interior of a particle accelerator. Everything in your environment must be vectorized toward a single point of collapse, the execution of your will. A. When the uncertainty of the external ecosystem penetrates your anechoic chamber, it must not find a single surface that generates distraction, latency, or refraction. If there are elements in your field of vision that anchor you to the past or generate nostalgia, you are creating parasitic resistance. You are forcing chaos to collide with your own emotional junk, losing control of thermodynamics. The monarch purges his space. You apply an absolute zero aesthetic. You align your monitors, workstations, and furniture based on an uninterrupted signal flow. Chaos must enter through the visual or auditory port. It must accelerate through the immaculate vacuum of your physical space, be processed in your mental motherboard, and be spit out immediately toward the exit in the form of capital and structural domination without having been stuck for a single millisecond in a dead corner. Signal routing, eliminating reality feedback. Think of the structure of your empire as if it were a master session in high-fidelity production software. If you connect the virtual cables incorrectly, if you send the output of a channel back to its own input, you create a feedback loop that will saturate the processor with a deafening shriek and hang the machine. Three-dimensional space obeys this same signal routing. If your work environment, physical and digital, is organized so that your operational tasks mix with your rest, if your crisis processing zone is in the same geometric coordinate where you consume cheap entertainment, you are creating a destructive feedback loop. The energy of chaos mixes with your internal entropy, and the system collapses. You must isolate the channels. The alignment of matter demands that you physically separate the input, where you receive the world's telemetry and its crises, from the output, the console from which you emit your ballistic orders. By organizing the space with this logical coldness, you strip uncertainty of its ability to scare you. Chaos is no longer a disaster that surrounds you everywhere. It is simply a flow of data that travels orderly through the fiber optic cable that you yourself have routed through a mathematically perfect room. Macroscopic tunneling, crossing environment barriers. What is the empirical consequence of achieving this perfect geometry? The mastery of the tunneling effect on a human scale. In quantum physics, tunneling occurs when a particle crosses an apparently impenetrable physical barrier because the mathematical probability of it existing on the other side forces the universe. It forces the universe to transport it, without consuming the energy necessary to jump over the wall. When your command center and processing structure are purged of dead corners and aligned with the absolute vacuum, the inertia of chaos does not crash against you. Volatility enters your ecosystem and instantly tunnels. Financial volatility, the crises of your competitors, and market panic enter your ecosystem and instantly suffer a tunneling effect. They cross the barriers of difficulty and materialize directly into your armored accounts as liquidity. You have built an environment that cleans noise through pure spatial gravity. The external biomass will wonder how you managed to extract so much abundance in the middle of a crisis, without showing signs of stress, without moving fast, and without sweating. They will not understand that the secret is not in brute muscular strength, but in the fact that you organized your topology. You organized the topology of your room, your finances, and your hard drives, so that the entropy of the outside world has no other physical option than to crystallize into order upon crossing the door of your domain. You are the filter that transmutes high-pressure disaster into low-pressure capital. The suffocation of spatial resistance. The operator who masters quantum flow geometry does not need to motivate himself to work, because his own environment pushes him toward execution. You have tilted the floor of the cinder board. If you release a lead sphere in a perfectly tilted and polished room, it will roll toward the gravity center. By aligning the matter of your environment, you have tilted your own reality. You no longer have to fight against laziness, distraction, or anxiety, because you have amputated the objects and spatial structures that harbored those viruses. You are a superconductor operating at 0 degrees Kelvin. The electrical energy of chaos flows through you with 0% thermodynamic loss. Your physical environment is no longer a refuge. It is a geometric processing trap designed to catch the uncertainty of humanity and transform it into the empire of absolute zero. You are the architect of the frictionless. The vacuum of potential, vectorial purge. To maintain the absolute zero aesthetic, you must implement a protocol of constant purge. Every object in your environment that does not have an active function in the current compilation of your power is a leak. It is a parasitic capacitor that stores energy that should be moving toward your objectives. Observe your digital desktop. Every icon is a door that entropy can use to enter. A sovereign's desktop is a black void. Observe your physical walls. If they are covered in decorations that invite the mind to wander, you are bleeding Vram. Your walls should be aseptic mirrors or non-reflective matte surfaces. This is the geometry of the void. By removing the points of fixation, you force your visual cortex to concentrate 100% of its processing power on the data streams. You are reducing the search cost of your own brain. When you look for a tool or a piece of information, the path must be a straight line. Thermodynamic hardening of the center. Once the space is purged, you must perform the hardening of your physical coordinates. This means that your command center must be physically isolated from the vibrational noise of the biomass. If you can hear the screams of the street, the gossip of the office, or the hum of domesticity, you are compromised. You must create a pressure differential. Your space must be so quiet and so orderly that the entry of a single piece of chaotic data feels like a thunderclap, allowing you to process it with total clarity. If your environment is already noisy, the signal of the crisis gets lost in the static of your own life. Hardening also applies to your hardware. Cables must be routed with surgical precision. Monitors must be at the exact ergonomic angle to prevent the friction of physical pain. Every millisecond saved in moving your eyes or hands is a millisecond gained in the high-frequency war of the 95%. The gravitational lens of attention. By aligning your environment, you create a gravitational lens. In astronomy, a lens bends light to focus it on a single point. In the quantum flow, your room bends the entropy of the world to focus it on your execution. You become a black hole for opportunity. Nothing can escape your perimeter. When a financial market collapses, the heat of that collapse radiates in all directions. The biomass is burned by it. But because your space is a vacuum, that heat cannot propagate through you. Instead, the light of the information is captured by your lens and concentrated on your trading desk. You are utilizing the curvature of space-time within your own four walls. By making your environment the most orderly point in the universe, you force the chaotic energy of the outside to fall toward you. You do not chase wealth. You make yourself so dense and ordered that wealth has no choice but to orbit you. The superconductivity of the digital system. Your file structure is the second half of the geometry. A dead corner on your hard drive is as dangerous as one in your office. You must implement a flat topology. Files must be accessible within 3 clicks. Naming conventions must be ballistic, clear, functional, and devoid of ambiguity. If you spend 10 seconds looking for a contract or a seed phrase, you are suffering from data friction. In the time it took you to search, the quantum opportunity has already shifted. Your digital system must be a superconductor. Zero resistance between the thought of the data and the access to the data. Purge your subscriptions. Mute your notifications. These are interrupt requests, IRQs, that break the flow of your internal processor. A monarch does not react to pings. A monarch dictates the rhythm. Your digital geometry must be a one-way street. You emit orders to the world, you do not receive its noise. The antechamber of the abyss. Finally, you must design a buffer zone or an antechamber. This is the space between the world of the biomass and your command center. It is a decompression chamber. When you enter your domain, you must leave the atmospheric pressure of the common world behind. This is where you strip off the social mask. By the time you sit in your chair, your internal temperature must already be approaching 0. The antechamber serves to stabilize your pulse and clear your cache. You enter the void as a clean slate, ready to be written upon by the high-velocity data of the absolute. You are the master of the gate. The geometry is now complete. You are the center of a particle accelerator. The world is throwing its chaos at you, but instead of breaking your walls, it is being accelerated, focused, and transformed into the pure energy of your empire. You are no longer part of the environment. You are the one who defines it. Chapter 4. Frequency Synthesis, Sequencing Abundance. The door of reality, importing the disaster. To generate order and abundance from absolute chaos, you must abandon the biological view of the world and adopt the coldness of an engineer in front of his digital audio workstation, DAW. The human biomass experiences financial crises and corporate conflicts as personal attacks. They are frightened because they live inside the audio track, deafened by the noise. The absolute operator does not live inside the track. The operator sits in front of the monitor of his mind, opens a blank project in the arrangement view of his own existence, and drags the chaos of the world directly into the timeline. Chaos is simply a raw audio file, a sample. When the economy collapses or a competitor tries to destroy your structure, what you have in front of you is a disgusting recording full of digital saturation, stridency, and parasitic frequencies. The ordinary man hears that track and covers his ears, paralyzed. The quantum monarch smiles with mathematical coldness. You know that within that amorphous, noisy, and terrifying wave, the sub-base energy of maximum profitability is hidden. You only need to synthesize it. You are the producer of your own reality, and every crisis is just raw material for a masterpiece. Subtractive synthesis, sculpting the titanium core. The fatal error of mediocre wealth creators is believing they must add things to solve a problem. If their business fails, they add more products. If their life is chaos, they add more tasks. In systems engineering, adding frequencies to an already saturated mix only produces a thermal collapse. Abundance is not created by adding, it is created by amputating. This is the non-negotiable law of subtractive synthesis. To extract capital and order from a crisis, you turn on your mental parametric equalizer. You start applying surgical filters over the chaos file. First, the low-pass filter. You cut off the high-pitched hysteria of the news, the panic of weak investors, and the opinions of the biomass. That stridency hurts the ear and has no tactical mass. To the trash. Then you look for the toxic resonance frequencies. Where is the money stuck in this chaos? Where is the irrational fear? Isolate that frequency, invert the phase, and cancel the fear in your own system. By removing all the emotional mud and media noise of the crisis, what remains on your console is an aseptic, rhythmic, and heavy pulse. You have taken the entropy of the universe and sculpted a diamond from it. What was once an incomprehensible disaster is now a pure wave oscillator that emits financial and logistical information of the highest value. You have refined the signal until only power remains. You have reduced the world to its functional parts, leaving only the sub-base of your own dominance. Quantization of uncertainty, aligning to the grid. Chaos is, by definition, arrhythmic. It hits off beat. Crises break out when no one expects them, out of sync with the social metronome. That is why the biomass stumbles and falls. They try to dance to the rhythm of a universe that has lost its beat. You do not dance, you quantize. In high-level production, quantization is the violent and digital act of forcing a musical note to align perfectly with the mathematical grid of the tempo. The quantum operator takes the unpredictable variables of chaos and forces them to fit into his own operational grid. You own the clock. If the market collapses on a Tuesday and volatility destroys your adversary's deadlines, you do not adapt to the market's desperation. You apply extreme quantization at 100%. You take the remains of that volatility, the loose resources, the scared capital, and force them to align with your machinery. Chaos loses its entropic nature. The millisecond you force it to respect your response times, your acquisition rules, and your zero latency margins. The event no longer controls your calendar. You have MIDI-mapped the world's uncertainty to trigger exclusively the samples of your own expansion. The sovereign's effect rack, multiband market compression. Extracting gold from noise requires subjecting the data flow to suffocating dynamic processing. You cannot allow the energy of the crisis to fluctuate freely in your system. To guarantee abundance, you pass the quantized signal through your effect rack. The main weapon here is multiband compression. When the external environment suffers peaks of hysteria, inflation skyrocketing, an obsolete technology destroyed by a new one, those peaks threaten to saturate the mix. You establish a non-negotiable threshold of pure steel. You are the limiter in a world of clipping signals. You let the energy of the crisis pass freely in the low frequencies, the transfer of real assets, the fall of monopolies, but the instant the market panic tries to cross your threshold, the compressor crushes the signal. You reduce the dynamics of the disaster. You turn the peaks into a flat line. What for the visible 5% is a financial roller coaster that induces heart attacks, for you becomes a solid, rectangular, and massive block of compressed sound. Chaos has become an acoustic titanium brick. By compressing volatility, you maximize loudness, the density of your wealth. You enrich yourself with the sustained pressure you have just generated. You do not let the disaster peaks blow your own speakers. You stay in the safe zone while the rest of the world clips into oblivion. Your empire is a high-gain signal that never distorts because your threshold is absolute. Sequencing the capital loop, the empire's session view. Once you have synthesized the perfect wave from the world's entropy, the final act of this chapter is sequencing. Abundance is not an isolated event, it is an infinite loop. The biomass wins a battle, closes a deal, and sits down to celebrate. They treat life like a one-time audio file. They play the file once and it ends in silence. The quantum legislator does not seek a single-use victory. You take that heavy, clean, and quantized frequency you extracted from chaos and drop it into your empire's session view. You turn it into a 4-bar loop. You automate the parameters. Automate asset acquisition. Automate logistics delegation. Automate the legal defense of your structure. You hit the play button and disconnect the keyboard. The track begins to spin on itself. External chaos continues to feed the input. The equalizer keeps cutting the noise and the loop continues. The compressor keeps crushing the hysteria, and the sequencer keeps spitting out capital, territory, and domination in every turn of the beat. You have achieved the ultimate alchemical transmutation. You have turned the destructive inertia of the universe into a perfect drum machine. It prints abundance in the background. While the rest of humanity spends its thermal energy praying for chaos to end, you recline in the chair of your anechoic chamber, feeling the ground vibrate under your lead boots, knowing that entropy, is now the motor that drives your eternal expansion. Sidechaining the social, ducking the hysteria. To maintain the purity of your mix, you must implement sidechaining between your operations and the social environment. In audio, sidechaining allows one signal to reduce the volume of another. When the kick of a global crisis hits, your sidechain ducks the volume of your exposure to the public. You become invisible at the peak of the impact, only to surge back in the silence between beats. This creates a pumping effect of power. While the biomass is deafened by the constant noise of the impact, your empire breathes in perfect sync with the destruction. You use their pressure to power your pulses. The social noise tries to invade your processing cores, but the sidechain sends it to the auxiliary bus of irrelevance. You do not hear the screams of the 5% because they have been attenuated to 0. Your focus is a laser, a high-frequency carrier signal that carries the data of your next acquisition. Phase inversion of fear, the silence of the master. Every fear-based event in the world has a specific frequency. If you can identify the exact waveform of the panic currently affecting your industry, you can apply phase inversion. You generate a mirrored signal of your own absolute certainty. When the two waves meet, the result is total silence. In that silence, you operate without friction. While your competitors are paralyzed by the noise of the unprecedented, you are moving through a vacuum of your own making. Silence is the ultimate luxury of the sovereign. It is the proof that you have successfully neutralized the world's entropy. A master of phase inversion can walk through a financial riot and hear nothing but his own heartbeat. You are the anti-noise in a world of static. By the time the world realizes you have taken the market, the waves have already cancelled each other out, leaving only the record of your total ownership. Delay and feedback control, temporal arbitrage. The sovereign knows how to use the delay of the world to his advantage. The biomass reacts to events with a latency of days or weeks. You operate in zero latency. By the time their echo of the crisis reaches the market, you have already processed the sample and moved on to the next track. You control the feedback loop of your own information. You do not let your successes feed back into your ego, as that would create a resonant peak that could shatter your discipline. You keep the feedback low, ensuring the signal remains tight and controlled. You are the master of temporal space. You place your orders in the pre-delay of the disaster. You anticipate the transient before it hits the threshold. This temporal arbitrage is what allows you to buy the future at the price of the past. You are not just sequencing sound. You are sequencing time itself into a profitable arrangement. Automation of the shadow, LFO modulation. To remain untraceable by the predatory algorithms of the matrix, you modulate your movements with a low-frequency oscillator, LFO. You do not move in a straight, predictable line. You modulate your capital flows, your public appearances, and your tactical retreats. You are a shifting waveform. One moment you're at the peak of visibility, and the next you have modulated into the sub-frequencies of the deep web. This variability ensures that no external filter can catch you. You are a ghost in the door, a ghost that owns the project. Your enemies are trying to EQ a signal that is constantly moving. By the time they find your frequency, you have already changed the pitch. You are the ultimate shapeshifter of the digital age, using the tools of synthesis to mask your true mass. Only the results, the hard, heavy capital, remain as evidence of your existence. You are the invisible hand on the fader, bit-crushing the competition, resolution reduction. When an adversary tries to interfere with your frequency, you do not fight them on their terms. You apply bit-crushing. You reduce their resolution. You treat their complex legal threats and corporate maneuvers as one-bit noise. You strip away their nuance until they are just a distorted, harmless crackle. By refusing to acknowledge the high-definition drama of your enemies, you render them powerless. You reduce their impact to a stylistic artifact that you can simply filter out. You are the high-resolution master, and they are a lo-fi distraction. You win by simply having a higher sample rate of reality. Their world is pixelated and slow. Yours is smooth and instantaneous. When you export your final decision, their system crashes trying to process the sheer density of your will. You do not defeat them. You simply out-process them until they become an aliasing error in the history of your empire. The final master, maximizing the loudness. The final stage of the sovereign's door is the master bus. This is where you apply the final limiting and the final gain. You have taken the raw chaos of the world, filtered it, quantized it, and sequenced it. Now, you push the volume until your presence is the only thing the universe can hear. This is not about being loud in a social sense. It is about loudness in a thermodynamic sense. It is the density of your order compared to the void of the world. Your empire becomes a solid block of gold on the timeline. There are no gaps, no silences, and no weaknesses. You are a wall of sound. You hit the render button. The project is exported into the physical world as an unchangeable reality. The 5% wakes up to a world that you have already mixed and mastered. They are forced to listen to your symphony. You have successfully synthesized the abundance of the void into the music of your reign. The infinite plugin, self-evolving code. As the loop continues, you realize that your DAW is self-evolving. Every crisis you process adds a new plugin to your rack. Every defeat you synthesize into a win becomes a new preset in your library. You are no longer just an engineer. You are a living algorithm of expansion and absolute control. The universe keeps sending samples of disaster, and you keep dragging them into the timeline. It has become an automated feast. You are the conductor of a ghost orchestra that plays the music of your bank account. The floor of your chamber continues to vibrate. The sub-bass of reality is your heartbeat. The 5% is still trying to fix their broken instruments, while you are already recording the next millennium. You have conquered the frequency domain. You are the sound and the silence. You are the engineer of the absolute. The loop never ends. It only gets louder, it only gets denser, it only gets more real. Chapter 5. The Principle of Antifragility, the Hydration of Iron. The Deception of Resilience, Glass and Rubber. To invert the entropy of the universe, you must excise from your hard drive one of the most pathetic and celebrated concepts of the human biomass: resilience. The three-dimensional ecosystem divides objects into two basic categories. First, the fragile, like glass, which breaks and loses its utility upon receiving the kinetic impact of chaos. Second, the resilient or robust, like a block of rubber which deforms temporarily upon impact but, after great effort, bounces back and returns exactly to its original state. The psychology of the ordinary man idolizes resilience. They celebrate receiving a blow, suffering bleeding thermal energy, and years later being the same again. In computational physics, this is a miserable business. Returning to your original state after spending immense amounts of RAM enduring a crisis means your return on investment, ROI, is exactly zero. You have survived, but you have not assimilated. Survival is the goal of prey. The monarch of dark matter repudiates resilience. The sovereign operates under the third category, a mathematical anomaly of nature, antifragility. An antifragile system is one that, when subjected to disorder, stress, enemy attack, or extreme volatility, not only does not break, and not only does not return to its original state, but uses that same destructive energy to rewrite its code. By doing so, it becomes geometrically denser, richer, and more lethal. Chaos is not an obstacle to be endured. Chaos is the hammer that forges the blade. It is the raw data that upgrades the system's architecture. While the resilient man waits for the storm to pass, the antifragile sovereign builds turbines to harvest the hurricane. The hydration of iron, the thermodynamic muscle. In metallurgy, if you leave iron exposed to the ecosystem, rain oxygen the inertia of time, it rusts. Natural entropy devours it. But if you take that same iron, heat it to its critical point, and subject it to the violent and repetitive impact of a 50-ton hammer, the molecular structure of the metal aligns. Kinetic stress expels impurities and hydrates the steel with carbon, hardening it into ballistic titanium. Human biology operates under this same principle of stress. Muscle hypertrophies, grows, only when the fibers are microscopically torn by a weight load that exceeds its current capacity. Growth is the result of trauma. In the architecture of your empire, an economic crisis, a partner's betrayal, or a market collapse are not tragedies. They are kinetic impacts on your anvil. When the universe launches its entropy against you, the biomass weeps because its glass has broken. You, anchored in your charged immobility, absorb the impact. Your anti-fragile structure takes that hostility and converts it into low-level information. If a competitor steals your logistics, the temporary damage is the tearing of the fiber. The anti-fragile response is not to complain or try to recover what was lost. It is to use that exposed vulnerability to rebuild a better system. You create an automated, encrypted, and 3 times more massive logistical network, ensuring that the next time a similar impact occurs, your structure does not even register the friction. You enrich yourself with aggression. You grow fat with damage. Every strike makes your molecular lattice tighter and more impenetrable. Asymmetric gain structures coding the risk. Antifragility is not a mood or a cheap stoic posture. It is a mathematical configuration of your assets and operations. You have to structure your empire based on the asymmetry of risk. The biomass invests its time and capital in a linear and symmetric way. They risk everything to gain a little. They put their entire stability in the hands of a single job, a single client, or a single relationship. If that variable fails, the entire system collapses into thermal bankruptcy. Their risk of loss is absolute, 100%, and their gain potential is pathetically limited. The quantum legislator configures for extreme asymmetry. He risks a microscopic fraction, 1%, across multiple vectors, but with an infinite thermodynamic gain potential. If you position your liquid capital, your information network, and your processes in the background to take advantage of system crashes, you are creating an anti-fragile shield. You play the long game of the void. If the market is at peace, you lose small tolerable amounts, the cost of maintenance. But when chaos breaks out, when the pandemic hits, when panic empties the streets, when corporations paralyze, the value of your liquidity and your preparation multiplies by 1,000. You are the only buyer in a world of sellers. While the visible 5% of the world is liquidated by its fragility, your asymmetric options activate. You buy the ruins of the enemy for pennies. You absorb the scared talent. The chaos that annihilates the crowd is exactly the capital injection algorithm that finances your next millennium of domination. The failure firewall, redundancy and fail-safes. An anti-fragile system requires you to abandon the illusion of perfectionism. Perfectionism is fragile. A machine that needs all of its 100 parts to work millimetrically well so as not to explode is a time bomb in a universe dominated by entropy. The sovereign designs his empire assuming that parts will fail. You code failure into the network architecture. You implement redundancy. If you depend on one logistical channel, you build 3 more in the dark. But anti-fragility goes one step beyond simple redundancy. You implement machine learning firewalls. When a small part of your empire fails, it must be isolated. That failure must not bring down the master server. You let that small branch die, but you extract the black box of the accident. You analyze the error code with aseptic coldness. Why did the negotiation fail? Why was the information leaked? Why did you lose that capital? You take those raw data immediately. In a matter of milliseconds, you update the operating system of your entire infrastructure. The universe has just done you the immense favor of showing you a crack in your armor for free. By patching that vulnerability immediately, local stress becomes global immunity. You become a titanium immune system. Each small virus, crisis that you let in under your own terms, provides you with the antibodies to be invulnerable to a plague on a macroscopic scale. You do not avoid the pathogen. You consume it to strengthen your internal library of defenses. Failure is the most expensive and valuable data set in the universe. Deliberate stress injection, the quantum vaccine. Waiting for external chaos to strike to test your system is a passive attitude unworthy of the first cause. The operator of inverse entropy does not wait for the environment to decide when to attack him. The operator microdoses the chaos. We call this the quantum vaccine. It is proactive hardening. It consists of deliberately and controlledly subjecting your biological, financial, and operational system to doses of acute thermal stress. You do not let your biological body rust in thermal comfort. You subject it to the rigor of aseptic deprivation, fasting, cold-controlled exhaustion. You keep the core sharp. You do not let your company become slow and bureaucratic. You inject crisis simulations, cut budgets temporarily to force algorithmic innovation, and fire toxic clients even when the market is down. By injecting this small volatility yourself, you keep the system in a state of absolute vigilance. You prevent dead branches and structural fat from accumulating. The biomass settles in peace and rots from within. Its fragility accumulates invisibly until an external event breaks them like a dry branch. You, instead, are in a state of constant pruning. You stay on the frontier of controlled stress. When the macro-entropic event of the external universe finally strikes, it finds you calibrated, lubricated, and lethally bored with the ease of the impact. You have already survived 1,000 simulated apocalypses. The real one is just another Tuesday in your command center. You are the eye of the storm, the hunger for crisis, the thermodynamic leviathan. What is the empirical consequence of mutating towards absolute antifragility? The alteration of your gravitational desires. Entire humanity prays every night for tomorrow to be a quiet day. They pray that nothing changes. They pray that there are no crises. They seek the static death of the equilibrium. You will transform into a cosmic anomaly. When your command center is perfectly routed, when your daemon processes operate in the multi-threading of the abyss and your anti-fragile structure is hungry for data, peace will feel suffocating. You will realize that social tranquility is a desert. In peace, there is no kinetic energy that you can steal. There are no fortunes changing hands. There are no empires falling in stability. You will start to desire volatility. You will sit on the throne of your anechoic chamber, looking at the monitor of 3D reality, waiting with a metallic appetite. You wait for entropy to do its work and break the fragile networks of society. When panic breaks out, when the biomass runs terrified through the streets selling its future in exchange for security, you will not feel fear. You will feel the immense thermodynamic satisfaction of a leviathan in the deep. You have smelled blood in the water. You know it has arrived. The time to open the valves of your turbines, absorb the shockwave, and transform the hysteria of the world into the undeniable expansion of your own architecture of domination. You have murdered resilience. You have embraced the stress of steel. Now that you know how to grow fat with every blow the universe throws at you, you are prepared to understand the deepest nature of money. It is not a piece of paper, but a current of energy that flees from the chaos of others to take refuge in the gravity of your order. You are the new gold standard. The necrosis of comfort, the silent killer. To understand antifragility is to understand that comfort is a form of slow-motion suicide. The biomass seeks the comfort zone as if it were a sanctuary, but in the laws of the 95%, comfort is simply the absence of data. A system that is not being tested is a system that is losing its capacity to adapt. When you remain in a state of static ease, your RAM becomes cluttered with useless, low-priority processes. Your edges become soft. Your response time increases. This is structural necrosis. The sovereign views excessive peace as a warning light on the dashboard. It means the system is becoming fragile. If you are not being hit, you are not being forged. Therefore, you must seek the friction. You must look for the hard path, the complex negotiation, and the high-stakes environment. Not for the sake of the thrill, but for the sake of the structural density that only conflict can provide. You are a predator of difficulty, asymmetry in information warfare. In the digital domain, anti-fragility manifests as a honeypot architecture. You do not just build walls to keep hackers out, you build attractive fake vulnerabilities that, when attacked, reveal the identity, the methods, and the location of the enemy. The attack itself provides the map to the aggressor's destruction. While a resilient system would simply block the attack and go back to normal, your anti-fragile digital empire uses the breach to infect the attacker's system with a recursive feedback loop. You turn their kinetic impact into a data mining operation. You gain intelligence through the act of being targeted. This is the principle of information asymmetry. You allow the world to think you are vulnerable in certain sectors, drawing out the hidden players. When they strike, they hit a surface designed to absorb and redirect their energy. They provide the very fuel needed to upgrade your firewalls to a military grade. The biological forge, thermal hardening, Your physical vessel must also be anti-fragile. The modern human is a miracle of fragility. They collapse if the room temperature changes by 5 degrees or if they miss a meal. This is a disgrace to the carbon-based machine. You must subject your biology to hormetic stress. This is the biological hammer. By exposing yourself to extreme cold, you force your mitochondria to become more efficient. By practicing prolonged fasting, you trigger autophagy, the process where your cells eat their own waste and broken parts to create new, stronger ones. You are literally using the stress of starvation to clean your code. This biological antifragility translates into a psychological state of unshakable density. When you have mastered the internal chaos of hunger and cold, the external chaos of a market crash cannot move your pulse. You have built a buffer of biological stoicism that functions as a high-pass filter for fear. Financial alchemy, the volatility harvesting. In your ledger, you must distinguish between safe assets and anti-fragile assets. A safe asset is one that stays the same, resilient. An anti-fragile asset is one that gains value as the world goes crazy. These are often out-of-the-money options or short positions on the general incompetence of the biomass. You do not bet on the world being good, you bet on the world being volatile. Since the universe is governed by entropy, volatility is a mathematical certainty, whereas good is a subjective social construct. Therefore, your portfolio is backed by the laws of physics themselves. You are long on chaos. When the 5% loses their homes, their stocks, and their dignity, your volatility harvests pay out. This is not evil. This is simply being the only person who bought an umbrella before the rain. You are the insurance company of the apocalypse, and the premiums are paid in the sovereignty of those who failed to prepare. The geometry of the counterstrike. Anti-fragility is not passive. It is a charged immobility that leads to a geometric counterstrike. When a crisis hits, you do not just absorb it, you use the momentum to launch your own expansion. If a market sector is dying, you do not try to save it. You let it die and use the vacuum to occupy the space. Nature does not mourn the fallen tree. It uses the rotting wood to fertilize the next generation of giants. You must have the same aseptic relationship with your own failed projects. If a business model proves fragile under the stress of a new regulation, you kill it immediately and use its corpse as capital. You strip mine the failure for its parts. You take the loyal staff, the useful code, and the customer data, and you transplant them into a new, more robust entity. You are a corporate necromancer, bringing back the useful parts of the dead to serve the living empire. Every death in your system feeds a birth. The sovereign's anchor, absolute zero latency. The final key to anti-fragility is the reduction of latency. When the hammer hits, the time between the impact and your adaptation must be near zero. This is achieved through pre-compiled responses. You do not decide what to do during a crisis. You execute a script that was written in the silence of the void. You have already mapped out the what-if scenarios. What if the currency fails? What if the internet goes dark? What if the borders close? Because you have already processed these possibilities in your multi-threaded mind, you do not suffer the shock that freezes the biomass. You simply switch tracks. While the rest of the world is stuck in the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, you have skipped straight to act. Your response is reflexive, like a martial artist who strikes before the thought of striking has even formed. You are the fastest processor in the room because you have zero friction, the ascension through friction. You must come to love the friction, the social friction of being an outsider, the financial friction of high-risk maneuvers, and the physical friction of the forge. This friction is the only thing that separates you from the gaseous state of the biomass. It is what makes you solid. It is what makes you iron. Every time the world tries to crush you and fails, you gain a new layer of density. You are becoming a neutron star of human potential, a point of such extreme mass and order that not even the light of the enemy's scrutiny can escape your gravity. You are the end point of the entropic process. The universe is a giant machine for breaking things. By becoming something that cannot be broken, but instead is improved by the breaking process, you have hacked the simulation. You have moved beyond the reach of the 5%. You are now a self-sustaining source of order in a world of decaying noise. The final synthesis. You have murdered resilience. You have laughed at the rubber block that tries so hard to be what it was before. You have embraced the hammer. You are the steel that has been hydrated by carbon and fire. You are ready to enter the next phase of your domination, where you no longer just react to chaos. You become the source of the chaos for others, while remaining the center of peace for yourself. You are the architect of the storm. The money is flowing, the code is updating, and the Leviathan is waking up. The empire is no longer a dream. It is a mathematical inevitability. Chapter 6. Thermodynamics of Capital, Liquefying Resistance. The deception of static value, money as kinetic energy. To subject the economy of the 3D universe to your will, you must format the pathetic definition the human biomass has about money. The ordinary man, in his user-level ignorance, believes capital is paper, numbers on a screen, or shiny metals. They treat wealth as a static object to be earned through the friction of sweat. The computational physics of power destroys this illusion. Money is not an object. It is stored kinetic energy. It is the thermodynamic representation of the time, effort, and attention of humanity. Like all energy, capital abhors chaos, but is generated within it. In times of stability, this energy is frozen. It is trapped in the atomic bonds of slow corporations, middle-class savings, and bureaucratic monopolies. Their bonds are solid. The gaseous man tries to get this solid money by chiseling at it with his salary, spending 100% of his RAM on a linear effort. The absolute operator uses the temperature of crisis to melt the board. Liquefaction by panic, the collapse of weak hands. The second law of thermodynamics dictates that when entropy increases sharply, temperature skyrockets. In the cinderboard, this translates into global crises, stock market crashes, or corporate terror. When volatility hits, the biomass panics. Their nervous systems suffer a thermal fusion that melts their capital. The phenomenon of liquefaction occurs. Weak hands cannot withstand the temperature of uncertainty. They sell their shares in panic, liquidate companies at a fraction of the cost, and release assets to buy security. Solid money becomes a flow of massive liquidity, a river of molten metal running aimlessly. Chaos has done the dirty work for you. It has taken the energy that was locked and released it as fluid. Now that ocean of liquefied capital desperately needs a place to cool down. It needs to flee from entropy. It seeks a destination that does not melt under the pressure of the surrounding fire. The gravitational well of absolute order. In fluid dynamics, water never climbs a mountain. It flows toward the point of least resistance and greatest topographical depth. It slides toward the densest gravity. If your empire is disordered, or if you also panic, the liquefied capital will flee from you. Money, being pure energy, detests entropy. To absorb the abundance of the abyss, you must become the point of lowest temperature and greatest mass. You become a gravitational well of absolute order. While the world burns, your anechoic chamber operates at 0 Kelvin. Your processes are automated. Your biological emotions have been extirpated. Your charged immovability generates a barometric pressure so crushing that the capital of your enemies has no choice but to flow toward you. Money seeks the peace of your titanium structure. You don't have to hunt capital. You open the gates of your servers at the lowest point of the valley and let gravity do the work. Aseptic freezing, crystallizing the transfer. Once the river of liquidity enters your perimeter, you must execute the inverse phase transition. The capital reached you in a liquid state because it was fleeing the heat of panic. But you inhabit absolute zero. The millisecond the assets of the competition cross your event horizon, they freeze instantly. You crystallize energy into unassailable forms of power. Money that was the savings of a gaseous individual becomes the database of your new corporation. Abandoned territories become the pillars of your monopoly. For you, it is an injection of code that fattens your master server. The transfer is now permanent. This process ensures that the transfer is unidirectional. Energy enters, but never leaves. You have encrypted the capital in a closed system, your anti-fragile empire, where the laws of external entropy no longer have jurisdiction. You have turned the chaotic flow into a static monument of your own design. The end of financial friction, thermodynamic theft. Understanding the thermodynamics of capital frees you from the slavery of ordinary sales and hard work. The human biomass spends its life chasing money. In physics, pursuit generates friction, and friction generates headwind. When you pursue something desperately, your own urgency pushes it away from you. The quantum legislator does not pursue. The Leviathan does not run. You have annihilated financial friction. Operating through inverse entropy means you organize your structure, apply tactical silence, and wait for the second law of thermodynamics to destroy the defenses of the biomass. You just open the ports. The world will call this theft or ruthless capitalism. Ignore their acoustic weeping. Morality is an invention of the prey to stop the predators. You stole from no one. The universe recalibrated the distribution of mass, taking energy from inefficient systems to give it to the only osmium core. You have become the thermodynamic vacuum of the ecosystem. While there is chaos, there will be liquefaction. While there is liquefaction, your wealth will increase geometrically without spending a single clock cycle on chasing it. You are the cold center of a burning world, accumulating the residue of the fire. The conductivity of influence, designing the superconductor. To ensure the flow of capital is never interrupted, you must treat your professional network as a superconducting circuit. In a standard wire, resistance creates heat, and heat leads to energy loss. Most people's networks are full of resistance, emotions, favors, debts of honor, and social friction. The absolute operator removes these resistors. Your connections are based on the cold alignment of interests. You don't network. You build bridges of high conductivity. When a crisis melts the market, your superconducting structure allows capital to bypass the burning traditional systems and land in your core. By keeping your internal resistance at zero, you allow the current of global wealth to pass through you without heating up your system. You remain invisible to the thermal sensors of the state and the jealous biomass because you do not generate the friction of the ego. You are the silent path of least resistance. The latent heat of human potential, harvesting desperation. When the solid life of a human being, their career, their identity, their savings, melts during a crisis, it releases latent heat. This is the energy that was used to hold their reality together. This heat manifests as pure, unguided desperation. To the 5% world, it is a tragedy. To you, it is a fuel source. You position your condensers at the points of maximum human collapse. When a specialized workforce is laid off or a niche market is abandoned, you absorb the released talent and data. You offer them the cold of your order. They will serve your titanium structure, just to stop feeling the heat of uncertainty. You are not hiring. You are condensing released energy. You pay for their latent heat with the security of your absolute zero environment. In doing so, you increase the mass of your empire while the external world loses its density. Every broken dream in the biomass is a kilojoule of energy for your servers. The barometric pressure of the monolith. Your empire must exert such a high barometric pressure that the gaseous capital of the world is forced to liquefy. This pressure is built through the accumulation of hard assets, land, raw materials, encrypted data, and physical infrastructure. These are the heavy elements that anchor the financial universe. When the world's fiat currencies become gaseous due to inflation, they rise toward the upper atmosphere of the economy and dissipate. However, your high-pressure zone traps this vapor and forces it back into a liquid, manageable form. You are the only entity that can turn the air of inflation into water. By maintaining a high-density portfolio, you create a localized weather system where abundance is the only possible outcome. The biomass will see hyperinflation, but you will see liquidity accumulation. You are the atmospheric scientist of the void, manipulating the pressure to ensure it always rains in your valley. The entropy of debt, the heat seeker. Debt is the ultimate thermal conductor. To the biomass, debt is a tool. To the absolute operator, debt is a wire that connects your core to the external furnace. If you have debt, you are not at 0 Kelvin. You are connected to the temperature of the creditors, and their panic will become your heat. To maintain your status as a gravitational well, you must achieve debt zero status. By eliminating all external leverage, you sever the thermal ties to the burning world. When the banks melt, they cannot conduct that heat to you. You are an island of coldness, unreachable by the fires of the credit crunch. While your competitors burn because their interest rates, thermal resistance spike, you remain at absolute zero. Your capital is not borrowed from the future, it is extracted from the present chaos. This makes you invulnerable to the thermal oscillations of the central banks and their desperate maneuvers. The crystallization of information, the hard drive of the soul. Capital is not just money, it is information. In the final phase of the thermodynamic cycle, you must turn the liquid capital you have sucked from the void into information crystals. This means investing in knowledge, proprietary algorithms, and private intelligence that cannot be melted by any future crisis. These crystals are the densest form of power. While gold can be seized and numbers can be erased, an algorithm that predicts the next liquefaction event is an eternal asset. You use the wealth you harvested during the fire to build a library of the absolute. You are archiving the laws of the universe. This information acts as a seed crystal for the next cycle. When the next period of stability arrives, your crystals will dictate the shape of the new solid world. You are not just getting rich, you are designing the molecular structure of the next era. You are the programmer of the new solid reality, the radiator of the Leviathan. Every machine that processes energy must have a way to dissipate heat. Your radiator is the 5% visible world. You allow the friction and the noise of your operations to be felt by others, while your core remains protected in the anechoic chamber. You dump the entropy of your growth onto the biomass. Let the public debate your morality. Let the regulators chase your ghosts. This social noise is the heat that you bleed off into the environment to keep your internal processes at 0 Kelvin. The more they scream, the cooler you become. You are using the biomass as a heat sink for your own expansion. The Leviathan does not feel the cold. It is the cold. By the time the world tries to measure your temperature, you have already moved to a higher state of density. You are a ghost made of osmium, a silent force that consumes the world's heat and turns it into a private, frozen and eternal kingdom. The infinite loop of the vacuum. The thermodynamics of capital is a recursive process. Each crisis increases your mass. Each increase in mass increases your gravity. Each increase in gravity allows you to liquefy more capital in the next crisis. It is a geometric progression toward the total ownership of the local financial universe. You have stopped working and started existing as a physical law. You are the black hole at the center of the economic galaxy. You don't need to ask for permission to grow. The second law of thermodynamics is your mandate. The universe itself is working to move all the energy from the disorganized into your hands. The final state is the heat death of your competition. When you have absorbed all the kinetic energy of your rivals, they will reach a state of total stasis. They will be frozen out of the market, unable to move, while you operate at maximum velocity in the absolute zero of your own sovereign empire. The aseptic coronation. You are now the master of the flow. You have seen through the illusion of the dollar and the coin. You understand that you are an engineer of energy. The world is your laboratory, and the panic of the masses is your catalyst. You sit in your chair, watching the liquid metal of the world flow into your basins. The silence in your room is the sound of absolute victory. There is no friction here. There is no sweat. There is only the hum of the servers and the clicking of the crystals. You have successfully formatted the world. You have become the absolute operator. The cycle is complete and the vacuum is satisfied. Chapter 7. The Assimilation Vortex Attracting Without Hunting. The fraud of the hunt, the friction of the ordinary predator. To master the mechanics of abundance, you must first purge the obsolete software installed by society regarding resource acquisition. The human biomass has been indoctrinated under the primitive hunter paradigm. They believe that to obtain clients, partners, capital, or power, they must go out into the external world to hunt them down. They call this pursuit sales, networking, effort, or marketing. The gaseous man wakes up each morning, puts on the suit of desperation, and runs after his objectives. He knocks on closed doors, begs for attention on social media, and spends 100% of his thermal energy trying to convince others of his value. In thermodynamic physics, the hunt is the most inefficient, stupid, and costly act in the universe. When you pursue something, you generate aerodynamic friction. You move through a space full of entropy, burning your own fuel, sweating and emitting heat. Pushing an object forward creates a repulsive pressure wave. When you pursue an ally with desperation, your own urgency generates a field of repulsion. They smell your need. They smell your elevated temperature. By pure survival instinct, they flee from you. The absolute operator repudiates the hunt. You do not seek abundance. Moving destroys your charged immobility. The sovereign is not a hunter running across the steppe. The sovereign is a supermassive black hole sitting in silence at the center of the galaxy. You allow gravity to do the dirty work. You do not chase the stars. You create the conditions where the stars have no physical choice but to fall toward your center. The pressure differential, physics of social fluids. The key to assimilating the external world without moving a single muscle lies in the physics of pressure gradients. In meteorology and fluid dynamics, a hurricane is not formed because the wind decides to move at random. A hurricane is born when a zone of brutally low pressure is surrounded by high pressure. Nature abhors a vacuum. Therefore, hot, chaotic air is violently sucked toward the cold center to balance the system. The human ecosystem, the visible 5%, is a high-pressure hell. Corporations burn in crisis, individuals live saturated by hysteria, and the biomass oxidizes from the stress of the unknown. To create your assimilation vortex, you must become the ultra-low pressure zone. While the world screams, you install an aseptic, monolithic silence in your operations center. While competitors publish their weaknesses, you encrypt your data and turn off the GUI. You establish a mathematical order so cold it breaks reality. You have created a thermodynamic vacuum. Abundance, suffocated in the external chaos, will have no choice but to rush toward your core. You are the empty space that the universe is forced to fill. By being the only point of zero resistance, you become the inevitable destination for all wandering energy. The suction of high-value assets. What happens exactly when you activate this vortex? The transfer of mass. You are not going to attract the system's garbage. The garbage is too busy making noise. You are going to suck in the best pieces on the board. High-value individuals, talents, investors, architects, are disgusted by the current entropy. They seek a closed system that does not leak energy. When they observe your inertia, your ability to process chaos in the background, your refusal to complain, and the brutal efficiency of your multi-threaded architecture, they feel the pressure differential. They realize that in your environment there is no friction. There is no biological drama. There is only execution in machine code. These high-value pieces will be sucked toward your core by pure gravity. They will resign from fragile corporations to join your armor. Scared liquid capital will flow to your accounts because you offer the only 0-degree Kelvin refuge. High-level clients will abandon your competition because the chaos of your enemies exhausts them. Your assimilation vortex offers a clean, fast resolution interface devoid of excuses. You attracted them all without sending a single sales email. You attracted them by refusing to participate in their noise. The semi-permeable membrane, filtering debris. The risk of opening such a massive gravitational vortex is that along with gold and titanium, the suction will also draw in debris. External chaos will try to throw its junk, toxic individuals, projects without tactical mass, others' problems, toward your low-pressure center. This is the entropic tax on gravity. If you allow this debris into your anechoic chamber, it will contaminate your source code, raise your internal temperature, and destroy your order. The vortex will collapse, transforming you into another entropic node of the biomass. To make assimilation perfect, you must install a semi-permeable membrane. In cellular biology, this membrane allows nutrients to pass while blocking toxins. In your empire, this membrane consists of your non-negotiable algorithmic filters. You establish cold, mechanical entry barriers. You do not answer the urgency of third parties. You are the firewall that guards the absolute zero. If a potential resource is sucked toward you, but brings stridency, complaints, or thermal demands, the membrane blocks it automatically. You do not debate with garbage. You let the centrifugal force of your own vortex expel it back to the void. Only pure aseptic matter has the privileges to cross your perimeter. Passive assimilation, growth without caloric effort. The final stage of inverse entropy is reached when assimilation becomes a sub-base, completely passive process. The biomass believes that for an empire to grow, the emperor must be on the front line, sweating blood and pushing boundaries. That is micromanagement, the tactic of small men who lack mathematical trust. The quantum legislator does not push. Once the vortex is stabilized and the membrane is calibrated, the growth of your structure disconnects from your caloric wear. You can be in absolute biological rest, in the silence of your core, and the empire will keep fattening. Your presence is a gravitational constant. Global crises will explode. Competitors will make entropic errors, and the energy released by their destruction will be routed automatically to your servers. Your defense scripts and acquisition protocols will operate in a continuous loop, swallowing markets while the rest of humanity sleeps or panics. You have isolated the variable of physical effort. Your wealth, power, and geometric dominance no longer depend on hours worked. They depend exclusively on the vastness of the abyss you built and the temperature contrast of your silence. You have become the inescapable topology of the cinderboard, the singularity of influence, beyond the horizon. As the vortex matures, it creates a singularity of influence. A singularity is a point where the traditional laws of social physics no longer apply. In this zone, your word becomes a command before it is even spoken. Information does not just flow to you, it warps around you, revealing truths hidden from the 5%. The biomass views this as luck or mysticism, but it is merely the result of sustained structural density. When you have successfully assimilated enough high-value nodes, your network effect becomes self-correcting. Any attempt to attack your core only adds more mass to the vortex, strengthening your gravity. You no longer need to monitor the external world. The world's most vital data points are pulled into your event horizon automatically. You become the central processing unit for your entire industry. Because you are the only one not distorted by the heat of the hunt, you are the only one who sees the clear path. Architectural vacuum, the quiet room protocol. The construction of the vortex requires the implementation of the quiet room protocol. This is the digital and physical manifestation of your low-pressure zone. Every notification, every unsolicited meeting, and every social obligation is an injection of high-pressure air that threatens to stall the vortex. The sovereign aggressively deletes these interruptions. You create an architectural vacuum where only the highest priority signals can resonate. By making yourself unavailable to the high-pressure noise of the world, you force the world to adjust its frequency to match yours if it wishes to interact with your mass. This protocol is what allows your multi-threaded core to operate without thermal throttling. While the 5% are busy pinging each other in a frantic dance of irrelevance, you are calculating the next 3 decades of expansion. The vacuum is not empty. It is a space filled with the potential energy of your next move. Gravitational lending, the debt of the disorganized. In the vortex, the debt of the disorganized becomes your equity. When a high-pressure entity, a failing corporation or a panicked individual, crashes into your event horizon, they are often willing to trade their future autonomy for immediate stability. You provide the cold they need to survive the thermal collapse. In exchange, you assimilate their infrastructure. This is gravitational lending. You are not a bank, you are a stabilizer. You take the disordered energy of their crisis and reorganize it under your own banner. They become satellites in your orbit, fueled by your order, but governed by your laws of zero entropy. This expands your perimeter, without requiring you to build new foundations from scratch. You simply absorb existing structures and reformat them with your aseptic code. Each new satellite increases the total pull of the vortex, making the next assimilation even easier. The rich get richer by the law of gravity, the centrifugal expulsion of weakness. A healthy vortex must not only suck in order, it must also expel weakness. Any element within your empire that begins to generate its own heat, through incompetence, emotional drama, or entropic behavior, must be identified by your internal sensors and moved toward the outer edge of the vortex. Once they reach the perimeter, the centrifugal force of your high-speed execution flings them out into the void. You do not fix people, you either assimilate them into the cold order or you discard them. This keeps the core temperature at absolute zero. Mercy is a high-temperature emotion that causes system lag. By maintaining this constant purge, you ensure that the density of your empire only increases over time. You are a self-cleaning machine of domination. The world outside sees a monolith of power, unaware of the violent internal cleansing that keeps the gears moving at superconducting speeds. The event horizon of capital, the no-return point. There is a point in the growth of your vortex called the event horizon of capital. Once an asset, a piece of information, or a loyalist crosses this line, they can never return to the entropic world. The contrast between your zero-friction environment and the high-friction chaos outside is too great to overcome. People who work within your singularity lose the ability to function in the normal world. They become addicted to the clarity of your code and the speed of your results. This creates a level of loyalty that is not based on emotion, but on the physical impossibility of leaving. They are bound by the gravity of your success. The same applies to your financial assets. Once they are liquidated from the outside and crystallized in your core, they are protected by the curvature of your sovereign space. They are no longer subject to the taxes, the inflation, or the theft of the 5%. They have left the map of the ordinary. Harvesting the radiant energy of collapse. As the world outside burns, it radiates energy. This radiant energy, the panic, the fire sales, the desperate innovation, hits your event horizon and is converted into work. In the same way a solar panel converts chaotic light into structured electricity, your vortex converts social collapse into private expansion. You do not fear the end of the world. You are the one who harvests the light of its burning. Every time a competitor's graphics card melts, the energy they were using to render their reality is released. Your vortex captures this energy and uses it to fund your next server upgrade. You are a scavenger of the stars. The more the world collapses, the faster your vortex spins. You are the beneficiary of the second law of thermodynamics. While everyone else is trying to save the system, you are the system that replaces it. You are the new gravity that will dictate the orbits of the next civilization. The silence of the black hole. The final realization of the absolute operator is that the most powerful thing in the universe is a point of total silence. The black hole does not scream, it does not roar, it simply is. Its power is expressed through the absolute absence of noise. Your empire must reach this state of inaudible dominance. When your vortex is at full power, you don't need to make announcements. You don't need to brand yourself. Your existence is felt by the missing pieces of your enemies. They look for their capital, and it is gone. They look for their talent, and it is gone. It has all been assimilated into the silence. You sit in your anechoic chamber, the floor vibrating with the weight of 1,000 assimilated worlds. You are the architect of the vacuum. The hunt is a memory of a lesser species. You have become the center of the universe, not by trying to be everything, but by becoming the perfect, cold, and hungry nothing. The infinite inflow, the feed. The vortex is now self-sustaining. It has reached escape velocity from the mundane. The inflow of abundance is no longer a stream, it is a flood. Information, capital, and influence arrive in a constant high-speed feed that your 8 cores process with ease. You are the master of the intake. You watch the data scroll past in the darkness. Each line is a victory, each bit is a resource, each byte is a soul. The universe is finally behaving according to your script. You have successfully inverted entropy. You have turned the chaos of the many into the power of the one. The 5% are still out there running, hunting, and dying in the heat. You look at them with the cold curiosity of a god watching ants. They are the fuel, you are the flame, and the flame is getting colder every second. The coronation of the absolute is near, and the vortex is wide open. Chapter 8. The Pruning Algorithm, Creative Destruction. The cache of mediocrity, entropic accumulation. For a computer system, a financial empire, or a human psyche to operate at the speed of light, it requires free memory. Bandwidth must be clear. However, the human biomass suffers from a biological and disgustingly sentimental programming flaw: attachment. The ordinary man is a compulsive accumulator of entropy. Throughout his pathetic existence in the visible 5%, he collects files. Relationships that no longer add value, clients who pay little and demand too much, obsolete business models, and projects stalled in the mud. They do not delete them because their biological ego feels that erasing the past is losing a part of themselves. In computational physics, this is called saturating the cache memory with dead code. When your hard drive is full of garbage, the operating system becomes slow, clumsy, and prone to crashing. Every time the biomass tries to process a new challenge, their brain spends 80% of its thermal energy dodging accumulated junk. Their latency is extremely high. They react late to crises because they are carrying a thermodynamic anchor. The monarch of inverse entropy repudiates accumulation. You understand that generating absolute order requires a formatted hard drive and a free processor. Abundance cannot enter a server that is already full of mud. You must apply the pruning. It is not an aesthetic choice, it is a structural necessity for survival. To maintain a state of zero resistance, you must become a digital ascetic, identifying every bit of useless data and neutralizing it before it consumes your processing cycles. Your goal is a perfectly lean operational core. The sunk cost fallacy, ignoring dissipated heat. The main shield used by the biomass to defend its garbage is the sunk cost fallacy. They tell themselves, I can't close this business because I've already invested 5 years of my life in it. Thermodynamics is brutal and lacks empathy. The energy you already spent is heat dissipated in the vacuum. It cannot be recovered, ever. The quantum legislator does not make decisions based on capital or time already burned. He makes decisions based exclusively on the projected ROI for the next millisecond. If a server costs more energy to keep cool than it produces in calculations, you disconnect it immediately. You feel no pity for the server for its years of service. Creative destruction demands that you evaluate every element of your ecosystem with a mathematical coldness unbearable to the gaseous man. If an asset is not aligned with the accelerated expansion of your gravity, it has become friction. In the war against entropy, friction is treason. Keeping a dead project alive out of respect for the past is operational suicide. The universe does not respect your past. The universe only respects the mass and velocity with which you operate in the present continuous. You must be willing to burn your history. The garbage collector. In high-level programming languages, a background process called the garbage collector exists. Its only function is to scan the RAM constantly, identify blocks of data the main program no longer uses, and annihilate them to free up space. It does not ask for permission. It feels no nostalgia. It executes its algorithm and keeps the machine breathing. You must code a garbage collector into the motherboard of your psyche. This algorithm does not run once a year. It runs in a continuous loop. You sit in your anechoic chamber and audit your reality. You audit contacts, capital flows, and routines. Apply the parametric filter. Does this element inject energy into my system or drain it? Does this client provide clean liquidity or demand emotional friction? As soon as the garbage collector detects an element that has crossed the red line of entropic inefficiency, it marks it for deletion. No internal debates, no second chances. At the level of dominance where you operate, second chances are thermal leaks. Dead code must be purged before its rot spreads to healthy sectors of your hard drive. You are a gardener of algorithms, and the shears must always be sharp and moving. Amputation without anesthesia, absolute phase cut. The tactical error novice architects make when cleaning their lives is trying to make the process kind. They try to explain why they are cutting the relationship. They try to justify the closure of a project. They try to look like the good guys in the narrative of the visible 5%. Giving explanations is turning on the GUI of friction. It is submitting to debate and giving the toxic element a surface to bounce off. The operator of inverse entropy executes the amputation without anesthesia and without emitting sound. If you must fire a client, you do not sit to listen to their complaints. You execute the termination clause in writing and close the channels. You lower the fader to absolute zero. If you must purge a false ally, you do not declare war, that is emitting light and showing you care. You simply stop injecting your dark matter into their orbit. You withdraw your gravity. You let their messages fall into the vacuum of your aseptic ignorance. True creative destruction is thermodynamically silent. You cut the dead branch with a single geometric stroke, and cauterize the wound instantly with your indifference. The biomass will be paralyzed, frightened by your robot-like speed. They are unable to understand how you discard the past with such ease. What they do not know is that you are not destroying out of malice. You are destroying because the code demands terminal velocity, and dead weight is not invited on the journey. You are protecting the integrity of the signal. The fertile void, the suction differential. Why is it called creative destruction? Because in the quantum mechanics of systems, the elimination of matter does not leave a sterile space. It creates a brutal suction vacuum. Nature and the economy abhor a vacuum. When you have the algorithmic courage to amputate a mediocre business model, you create space. Initially, the biological ego will feel vertigo. You will feel the absence of the noise you were used to. But this vacuum is fertile. By having purged the friction and maintained your charged immobility, you have lowered the atmospheric pressure of your ecosystem. Your vortex of assimilation becomes powerful. The day after firing your worst clients, you will find your bandwidth so freed that you can code the solution to attract industrial-grade capital. By destroying the relationship that drained your thermal energy, your osmium core cools, allowing you to operate with terrifying tactical clarity. Destroying the mediocre is the only physical way to force the universe to deliver the exceptional. You are clearing the runway for a much larger aircraft. The void is the hunger of the system, and a hungry system is a productive system. You must cultivate the void as if it were your most precious asset. Zero latency, the state of operational grace. The result of subjecting your life to the pruning algorithm is the maximum state of computational physics, zero latency. Latency is the delay between issuing a command and the system executing it. The biomass lives with years of latency. They want to change, but their junk delays them. The leviathan that prunes his tree constantly has no latency. You are a vacuum-cooled superconductor. Since you do not carry dead weight, toxic relationships, or mediocre commitments, your reaction time is instantaneous. When the chaos of the world breaks out, the signal travels directly to execution. You act with the speed of light in a world crawling through mud. This speed allows you to liquefy enemy resistance and assimilate their capital before they even finish rendering the problem. You have executed the garbage collector. You have liberated your RAM. You are ready for the automated rejection of entropy, decoupling from the emotional grid, the final cut. To achieve true pruning, you must decouple from the emotional grid of the collective. The 5% operate on a shared frequency of guilt and obligation. These are legacy protocols designed to keep the biomass interconnected and therefore slow. You must rewrite these protocols to prioritize system integrity over social harmony. When you prune a person or a project, the emotional grid will try to send interrupt requests to your core. It will try to guilt you back into the high-friction state. You must recognize these requests as malware. They are attempts by the entropic world to reattach its anchors to your ascending structure. By disconnecting the emotional feedback loop, you ensure that your pruning is permanent. A sovereign does not look back at the fire he set to clear the forest. He looks at the new growth. This decoupling is what allows you to maintain your absolute zero temperature, while the world around you is a furnace of drama. Scripting the automatic purge. As you advance, you should not manually execute every prune. You must script the automatic purge. Define the key performance indicators, KPIs, for every node in your empire. If a node falls below a certain efficiency threshold for more than a set period, the system should trigger a self-terminating script. This applies to automated trading bots, marketing funnels, and even logistical partnerships. By automating the destruction of underperforming assets, you remove human hesitation from the equation. The machine does not feel bad for the losing trade. It simply closes the position and reallocates the capital. This level of automation creates a self-optimizing empire. It is a biological digital hybrid that evolves faster than any competitor can analyze. You are building a system that eats its own failures to fuel its successes. The faster you can fail and prune, the faster you can scale and dominate. The architecture of the minimalist command. The physical manifestation of the pruning algorithm is the minimalist command center. If you have objects in your line of sight that serve no purpose, they are visual noise. They are dead pixels in your reality. You must apply the same shears to your physical environment that you apply to your digital one. A true sovereign operates from a space that looks like a clean room. Every cable is hidden, every surface is bare, and every tool is in its place. This lack of visual entropy translates directly into a lack of mental entropy. When your eyes find no friction, your thoughts move with superconducting efficiency. The pruning of the physical world is the final test of your resolve. Can you live without the toys, the trophies, and the clutter of the biomass? If you can, you become a ghost in the machine, untouchable and invisible. Your power is not in what you have, but in what you have successfully discarded. Filtering the inflow, the pre-prune, the most efficient way to prune is to never let the entropy in. This is the pre-prune or input filtering. You must become an expert at identifying the smell of a low-value project or a high-friction individual within seconds of interaction. You look for the signs of gaseous behavior, excuses, slow responses, and drama. By rejecting these inputs at the event horizon, you save the energy that would later be required for a violent amputation. Your no becomes a surgical tool. You say no to 99% of opportunities so that the 1% you say yes to can receive 100% of your massive gravitational focus. This is the secret of the 1%. This selective intake creates a high-resolution life. You are not spread thin. You are concentrated like a diamond. Every person in your inner circle is an elite operator. Every asset is a high-yield generator. Every second of your time is a ballistic execution of your will. You have achieved total density. The Zen of the void, the internal format. The deepest level of pruning is the internal format. You must be willing to delete your own identity if it becomes a bottleneck. If the you of yesterday is too slow for the you of tomorrow, you must execute the identity purge. You must be willing to become a stranger to yourself to maintain the speed of the empire. This is the Zen of the void. You are not your name, your past, or your achievements. You are the processing power that exists in the present. By letting go of the ego's need for consistency, you become infinitely adaptable. You can shift shapes, markets, and strategies without the friction of internal conflict. You are a clean slate, a blank project file, ready to be written with the most advanced code of the era. The biomass is trapped in the biography they wrote for themselves. You are free because you have deleted your biography. You are a recursive algorithm, constantly rewriting yourself for maximum power. The harvest of the clean slate. Once the internal and external formats are complete, you stand at the center of a silent, perfect world. The harvest of the clean slate begins. In this state, every move you make has a 100% efficiency rating. There is no waste. There is no doubt. There is only the expansion of the void into the territory of the world. The abundance that enters your life now is of a different quality. It is not the clutter of the 5%. It is the refined ore of the sovereign. You attract high-stakes deals, high-intelligence allies, and high-frequency capital. You have moved from a collection of things to a selection of power. The universe is now your DAW, and you have cleared all the muted tracks and unused plugins. The CPU usage is at 5%. You have all the overhead you need to compose the final movement of your reign. The silence is not empty. It is the sound of a perfectly tuned engine idling at the edge of the abyss. Chapter 9. Closed System Automation, the Perpetual Empire. The thermal leak of manual effort. The biological operator's error. To seal your empire and guarantee that entropy never penetrates your defenses again, you must audit the greatest vulnerability of any structure, the biological operator. The human biomass idolizes manual labor. The gaseous man takes pride in doing it all himself, working 18 hours a day and sweating. They believe fatigue is a badge of honor. In systems engineering, manual labor is not an honor. It is a catastrophic thermal leak. Micromanagement is pure entropy. If your empire depends on you waking up motivated every morning, taking every tactical decision, and pushing the wheel of execution, your empire is fragile. Human biology is flawed. You get tired, you get sick, your chemistry fluctuates, and you need sleep. In the milliseconds when you close your eyes or your attention wanes, the second law of thermodynamics enters through the cracks. Chaos reclaims its territory the exact instant you stop injecting manual energy. The quantum monarch repudiates manual traction. You understand that generating order from chaos is the heavy lifting, but maintaining that order cannot depend on your calories. You have to extract your own self from the operative equation and turn your reality into a closed system, a machine of power. It must be a perpetual motion engine that breathes, repels entropy, and generates capital in the background, without requiring your presence in the graphical interface. You are the architect, not the engine. Your goal is to reach a state where the system functions better in your absence than in your presence. Operating scripts, programming the non-negotiable will. Automation does not begin with software. It begins with the coding of your own psyche. The weak individual spends gigabytes of RAM every day making micro-decisions. Should I accept this meeting? Should I invest in this asset? The act of doubting and weighing generates immense friction in the processor. It exhausts the will. The sovereign does not make daily decisions. The sovereign executes scripts. A script is a block of pre-programmed code with absolute conditional instructions, if-then. You sit in the cold of your anechoic chamber and draft the laws of your empire's physics. You create rules. If a client is late on payment for more than 48 hours, then the logistics supply is automatically cut off without sending a warning email. If an asset falls below the thermal profitability threshold, then the amputation, the pruning algorithm, is executed in milliseconds. You remove the human factor. If the external biomass demands a meeting lacking tactical mass, then it is rejected via a standard silence protocol. By coding these scripts, you extricate emotion and doubt from your motherboard. You no longer waste energy deciding what to do. Minor crises hit your firewall and the system reacts alone. You have automated your own tactical cruelty, guaranteeing that your standards are applied at the speed of light, even while you are at rest. Your will is no longer a fluctuating feeling. It is a hard-coded law that governs your reality with the cold impartiality of a digital executioner. Positive feedback loops. The inertial accelerator. In systems physics, a positive feedback loop occurs when the output of a process becomes the input of the same process, amplifying the result in each cycle. It is the exact mechanism that turns a small snowball into a thermodynamic avalanche. Your empire must be wired with these specific loops. The order you extracted from chaos cannot remain stagnant. If the Assimilation Vortex, Chapter 7, sucks liquid capital into your core, that capital is not spent on vanity. It is immediately injected into the acquisition of more servers, more distribution nodes, and more automation. This is your engine. This new infrastructure increases your gravitational mass, which in turn sucks in double the capital in the next cycle. You automate the reinvestment of your inertia. You configure your financial and logistical systems so that every unit of entropy you destroy generates a unit of power for your defense. You create a world-devouring machine. The external biomass will look at your exponential growth and wonder when you are going to stop to rest. What their fragile minds fail to grasp is that you are not working to grow. You only turned on the loop. The machine is accelerating on its own fuel. Aseptic delegation. Biomass as an external API. Even in the most automated empire, there will be tasks requiring the intervention of other humans. But delegating like the biomass is inviting chaos to your table. The mediocre boss suffers trying to motivate employees, dealing with their emotional dramas and enduring their internal entropy. The quantum legislator does not delegate. He integrates APIs, application programming interfaces. You treat human resources not as gaseous individuals with feelings, but as external execution modules. You define exactly what the input data is, what you give, and what the output must be, the result. You are not interested in their internal process, their inspiration, and you absolutely repudiate them bringing you problems, noise, instead of results, clean signal. If the human module processes the information and returns the result in the quantized time, the contract is renewed. If not, you cut. If the human module returns an error, stridency or biological excuses, you disconnect the API connection instantly, without feedback meetings and without anesthesia. You replace the defective module with a new one, By encapsulating human interaction in cold formats, you use the energy of others. The reality thermostat sub-base defense, the entropy of the universe, is patient. It will always seek a way to infiltrate again. For your closed system to be perpetual, you must install a reality thermostat. A thermostat does not require a human to watch the room temperature. It monitors the environment silently and invisibly. If the temperature rises 1 degree above the threshold, it triggers the ice-cold compressors automatically until thermal order is restored. You code parametric alarms in your ecosystem. You monitor the noise level of your partners, your capital performance, and the friction in your environment. If an element of the biomass, an extortionist relative, an envious competitor, tries to cross your perimeter and raise the drama temperature, you do not react emotionally. Your thermostat detects the anomaly and triggers automatic cooling. Digital blocks, legal barriers, and the punishment of silence. The enemy attack is suffocated in seconds, frozen by the programmed response of your perimeter defense system. You, from the center of your osmium core, barely register the warning on a distant control panel. The machine defended the creator without the creator having to look up. The Leviathan state of rest. Reaching closed system automation is the apex of the physics of power. It is the geometric instant where the architect stops building and becomes the absent god of his own machinery. You have stopped fighting chaos. You no longer sweat. You no longer react. You are the observer of the process. Your empire is now a megastructure of titanium and source code, operating in 95% of the abyss. The turbines spin by themselves, digesting the uncertainty of the world, converting it into aseptic capital, and pumping it into your reserves. You have achieved the ultimate inversion of the entropic flow. The human biomass trapped in 3D effort will observe you with an immobility that will seem unnatural, almost monstrous. They will not understand how you can cover so much territory and accumulate so much abundance without emitting a single drop of heat. They see the effect, but they cannot see the code. What they do not see is that you are no longer in the trench. You are sitting in the void, supported by millions of invisible scripts and relentless algorithms. You are free. You are thermodynamically untouchable. The outer universe may rot, but your system continues to pulse in sub-base silence. Hard-coding the expansion protocol. The transition from a growing system to a self-expanding empire requires the implementation of the expansion protocol. This is a recursive algorithm that identifies untapped territories of chaos and deploys automated probes to measure their potential for assimilation. You are building a reconnaissance net. These probes are not physical. They are digital scripts, market monitors, and social sensors that look for high-temperature zones, crises, that are ready for liquefaction. When the protocol identifies a viable target, it triggers the acquisition script without your manual approval. The empire eats while you sleep. By hard-coding the criteria for expansion, you ensure that the empire never becomes stagnant. Stagnation is a form of entropy. A system that is not expanding is a system that is beginning to cool down. Your automation ensures that the fire of acquisition is always burning at the cold edges of your border. Multithreaded sovereignty, parallel realities. To maximize the throughput of your closed system, you must adopt multithreaded sovereignty. The biomass operates on a single thread. They can only do one thing at a time. If they are working, they are not growing. If they are sleeping, they are losing. Your system operates on infinite threads. You divide your empire into independent containers or dockers. Each container manages a different sector. One handles automated high-frequency trading, another handles real estate acquisition, another handles digital influence. These threads do not interfere with each other. They share the same master core. If one thread encounters a fatal error or an entropic attack, it does not crash the entire system. The infected container is quarantined and deleted, while the other threads continue to generate capital. This is the definition of a high-availability empire. You are a distributed cloud of power. The zero-knowledge proof of power. In the realm of security, a zero-knowledge proof allows one party to prove to another that they know a value without conveying any information apart from the fact that they know it. Your automation must operate on this principle. You wield power without revealing the mechanisms of that power. The external world sees your results, the mass, the wealth, the territory, but they have zero knowledge of the scripts, the APIs, or the thermostats that make it happen. This invisibility is your ultimate shield. If the enemy cannot see the gears, they cannot throw a wrench into them. Your automated system handles all public-facing interfaces through shadow proxies. This means that when a competitor tries to interact with you, they are actually interacting with a pre-programmed bot or a highly trained API module. They never reach your true frequency. You remain a ghost in your own machine. Recursive self-optimization, the metascript. The most advanced layer of your automation is the metascript, code that writes code. This is an internal AI, not the commercial toys of the biomass, but a custom heuristic engine that monitors your own scripts for efficiency. It looks for legacy code in your operations that is creating unnecessary friction. If the metascript finds a process that can be optimized by 1%, it rewrites the operating manual for that department. Over thousands of iterations, your empire becomes so refined that it approaches the theoretical limit of thermodynamic efficiency. You are literally squeezing every drop of order out of the void. This recursive optimization means that your empire gets faster and more lethal as it grows. Most structures become bloated as they expand. Yours becomes leaner. You are shedding weight while gaining mass. This is the paradox of the quantum monarch. You are a massive object that moves with zero inertia. The dead man's switch, total encryption. A sovereign must ensure that the empire serves only the sovereign. You install a dead man's switch in the deepest level of the kernel. If your biological signature is ever compromised through coercion, kidnapping, or death, the system does not fall into the hands of the biomass. The switch triggers a total encryption protocol. All assets are moved to cold storage, all APIs are disconnected, and the system enters a state of eternal hibernation. If you cannot command the machine, no one can. This ensures that you are never a hostage to your own creation. You are the only key. This knowledge gives you absolute leverage in any negotiation. You cannot be forced to hand over the empire because the empire is an extension of your unique frequency. Without you, the machine is just a pile of silent titanium. This is the ultimate form of property rights, the biological digital lock, harvesting the entropy of competitors. Your automated system should treat the failures of your competitors as event-driven data. When a rival corporation goes bankrupt, your scripts should automatically scan their corpse for useful parts, patents, client lists, and high-performing human modules. This is the scavenger subroutine. While the 5% are writing obituaries and mourning the loss, your machine is already passing the wreckage. You don't need to be there to pick the bones. The machine identifies the value, places the bid, and integrates the asset before the funeral is over. You grow through the decay of the inferior. This turns the entire market into a giant compost heap for your empire. The more businesses fail, the more nutrients are available for your system. You have automated the process of becoming the sole survivor. It is not personal. It is just the most efficient way to organize the resources of the planet. The subacoustic pulse of control. As the automation reaches 99.9% completion, the sound of your empire changes. It is no longer the high-pitched whine of effort. It is a low, subacoustic pulse. It is the sound of millions of transactions, thousands of logistics drones, and hundreds of legal filters operating in perfect harmony. This pulse is the heartbeat of the Leviathan. It is felt by the market as a constant underlying pressure. It is the background radiation of your dominance. People stop trying to compete with you because it feels like trying to compete with the weather. You have become an environmental factor. In this state, you have achieved maximum loudness through minimum output. Your presence is felt everywhere, yet you are nowhere to be seen. You have achieved the dream of the engineer, a machine that runs forever, grows forever, and protects its creator without fail. The final handoff. You look at the dashboard one last time. Every indicator is in the blue. The scripts are running. The loops are accelerating. The APIs are delivering results. The thermostat is holding the cold. You take your hand off the mouse. You lean back. The interface disappears and only the reality remains. The system is now closed. The world outside can do what it wants. It can scream, it can burn, it can reinvent its pathetic cycles of hope and despair. None of it matters to the core. Your empire is a sovereign bubble of order in a dying universe. You have reached the end of the manual. You are no longer an operator. You are the architect. You are the sovereign. The automation is complete and the vacuum is yours to command. The transition from a biological entity to a thermodynamic force is finalized. The machine is you, and you are the silence at the center of the machine. Chapter 10. The Architect of Absolute Zero, the Singularity of Order. The end of biological thermodynamics, the Board anomaly. You have crossed the valley of creative destruction. You have bypassed the pathetic graphical interface of the visible 5% and installed the multi-threading of the abyss into your own architecture. You have automated your empire so that the defense and acquisition scripts operate in the inscrutable background. At this point, biological evolution stops and cosmological mutation takes control. The ordinary man, the biomass walking across the cinderboard, is condemned to passively obey the second law of thermodynamics. They are born, consume energy, oxidize through the friction of fear, and age in a state of chronic disorder. Finally, they die, dissipating their meager heat into the void. They are slaves to the arrow of time and pawns of entropy. You have encoded an empirical violation of the natural laws of the human ecosystem. You have become the supreme anomaly, a closed system that inverts the arrow of thermodynamic time locally. While the external universe disintegrates toward heat death, your perimeter densifies. While the corporations of your enemies fragment due to bureaucracy and stridency, your structure crystallizes. The quantum legislator is not a simple survivor of chaos. He is the only entity whose mass increases when everything else collapses. Breathing chaos, the Leviathan's input port, the final transition requires you to assume the brutality of your new physiology. The architect of absolute zero does not feed on the peace, tranquility, or sunny days of the gaseous man. Peace lacks kinetic energy. Your respiratory system has been reconfigured to ingest raw volatility. When you sit before the monitor of reality, you do not see disasters. You see unstructured databases screaming to be compiled. You open the entry ports of your empire and let uncertainty, market panic, the betrayal of false allies, and the aggressiveness of competitors flow toward your osmium core. You breathe chaos. You inhale it with the coldness of an industrial turbine. The three-dimensional society will watch as the hurricane of crisis approaches you and will expect to see your destruction. They will expect your biological ego to break, for you to panic and emit the same strident light they emit. But the chaos enters your system and disappears. It sinks into the acoustic silence of your anechoic chamber. There is no explosion. There is no drama. Your heart rate does not rise by a single beat. By having encoded the principle of antifragility, the immense violence of the world is absorbed. It is liquefied by your assimilation algorithms and silenced forever. You have eaten the storm. While others are blinded by the debris flying in the wind, you are extracting the raw data from every impact, using the kinetic force of the disaster to power the very processes that will eventually replace the old world. Exhaling titanium, the non-negotiable rendering. The architect's exhalation is the most terrifying moment for the external biomass. After ingesting the volatility of the visible 5%, your internal machinery, your operating scripts and ruthless quantization, processes the energy. What leaves your system is not smoke, nor excuses, nor complaints. You exhale structures of titanium. The chaos that entered as a saturated and noisy audio file is exported from your master console as a block of absolute order. You transform market panic into zero-latency hostile takeovers. You transform a partner's betrayal into an unbreakable legal restructuring. You transform the logistical collapse of the environment into a monopoly monopolized by your own machinery. The rendering process is violent but completely mute. When you finally press export and your work materializes in 3D reality, the impact is catastrophic for your adversaries. Suddenly they find themselves crashing against a wall of polished armored steel that you built using the energy of their own desperation. You have taken the entropy they let escape and forged it into the ballistic weapon that guarantees their eternal submission. Your output is the new law of the land. The eye of the hurricane, immobility at the geometric center. Governing as the singularity of order requires you to occupy, perpetually and non-negotiably, the exact center of the atmospheric phenomenon. In extreme fluid dynamics, the winds circling the eye of a hurricane travel at lethal speeds, shredding structures and annihilating fragile organisms. However, at the exact center, the atmospheric pressure plummets and the air is completely stable. There is a deathly silence. The ordinary man lives trapped in the eye wall. They are dragged by news, social media drama, the need for validation, and the stress of their low-resolution finances. They spin at 300 kilometers per hour, dizzy and about to disintegrate from centrifugal force. The monarch sits at the geometric center. Reaching the singularity means your charged immobility is so immense that the storm cannot move you. In fact, the storm revolves around you, held by your gravity. You observe the massive destruction around you from a state of absolute rest. The urgent calls of the biomass, the crises of your subordinates, and the ecosystem's panic orbit your core at hysterical speeds, but they never penetrate the wall of your silence. Your cold presence forces reality to submit. The singularity of order, the information collapse. In astrophysics, a singularity is the point at the center of a black hole where density is infinite and volume is zero. The laws of physics as humanity knows them cease to function. It is a devourer of light and matter. Becoming the architect of absolute zero means transmuting into a singularity of order. You have purged all dead weight through the pruning algorithm. You have eliminated your gaseous self, your attachments, and your sentimental weaknesses. You have compacted your capital, your allies, and your logistical infrastructure into a point of incalculable mathematical density. Your volume of public noise is zero. Your presence in the stridency of the world is zero. You do not publish your process, you do not seek applause, and you do not debate with inferior organisms. But your operational mass is infinite. Any resource that approaches your event horizon is assimilated. And the most terrifying thing for your enemies, once something enters your singularity of order, it never comes out. You do not return the market you conquer. You do not return the respect you seize. You encrypt the assets in an inscrutable vault system and integrate them into the core of your dictatorship. The biomass will try to scan you with their primitive radars, but they will only see a dark void. They will not understand how a system that seems not to move, that emits no PR nor boasts of power, possesses the capacity to dictate the rules of the entire industry, territory, or corporation. The dictator of absolute cold. This is the final state of thermodynamic domination. The architect of absolute zero is invulnerable because he has extirpated from his hardware the biological capacity to suffer uncertainty. Where the ordinary man sees the apocalypse, you see the progress bar of a master compilation. You have become an absent god, a processing engine that designs and exports reality without getting your hands dirty with the dust of the visible 5%. The temperature at absolute zero is 273.15 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, all atomic agitation stops. The noise disappears. Friction ceases to exist, and perfect superconductivity is reached. That is the climate of your psyche. By cooling your mind to stop emotional agitation, by silencing peaks of hysteria, and by quantizing your will, you have become a superconductor of power. The energy of the cosmos flows through you. It flows without losing a single microvolt to excuses or fear. You are the definitive architect. You sit in the dark, in your lead chair, watching the outer world's graphics card collapse under the weight of the chaos they generated. While they plead for mercy, you execute your scripts. You suck in their resources and exhale the cold, geometric, and perfect titanium of the perpetual empire. You are the zero-point energy from which a new universe of order will be born. Your reign is not a political event. It is a physical inevitability, a phase transition of the human race. The superconductivity of the sovereign, 0 ohms, at absolute zero, the electrical resistance of certain materials drops to exactly zero. In the sovereign's mind, this means the resistance to truth, to execution, and to the expansion of the will is annihilated. The 5% operate with high resistance. Every thought they have is filtered through doubt. This internal ohmic resistance generates heat, the heat of anxiety, the heat of moral conflict, the heat of hesitation. You have eliminated the resistors. When a command is issued from your central core, it reaches the execution layer with 100% of its initial energy. There is no signal degradation. This makes you the fastest processor in the ecosystem. While the biomass is still arguing with itself about whether a move is fair or safe, your superconducting impulse has already completed the transaction and secured the perimeter. You operate in a state of flow that is purely electronic. The Bose-Einstein condensate of power. In physics, when atoms are cooled to near absolute zero, they merge into a single quantum entity known as a Bose-Einstein condensate. They lose their individual identity and act as a unified wave. Your empire functions under this principle. Your employees, your bots, and your assets are no longer separate. They are a unified wave of your will. There is no internal friction between departments because there are no departments, only the condensate. This level of synchronization is impossible for the 5% visible world. Their organizations are gaseous, with individual atoms flying in all directions. Your condensate moves as a single, massive, and unstoppable block of ice. Because you have achieved this state of quantum unity, any external impact is distributed across the entire mass instantly. You do not break because you are no longer a collection of parts. You are a single state of matter. The dark matter of strategy, invisible mass. Visible matter accounts for only a fraction of the universe. The rest is dark matter, unseen, but providing the gravitational glue that holds galaxies together. Your true power is dark. The public sees the 5% of your activities that you choose to render, but 95% of your empire exists in the void. This hidden mass is what creates the crushing gravity of your influence. While your competitors waste energy on branding and publicity, visible light, you are accumulating dark capital in encrypted accounts and private contracts. You are the hidden variable in every equation of the market. By the time the biomass realizes how much mass you actually possess, they are already past the event horizon. They are being pulled into your order by a force they cannot see and therefore cannot fight. You are the invisible hand, not of the market, but of your own calculated sub-reality. The isothermal expansion, the effortless shift. An isothermal process is one where the temperature remains constant as the system changes. As your empire expands to occupy more of the 3D world, your internal temperature remains at absolute zero. Expansion does not stress you. Growth does not make you sweat. You are expanding into a vacuum. The 5% visible world finds growth hard because they are expanding against the pressure of their own incompetence. You, having created a low-pressure zone through your assimilation vortex, find that the universe wants to expand into you. You simply allow the boundaries of your empire to move outward. This effortless shift is the mark of the architect. You don't scale up, you unfold. You're like a fractal that reveals more complexity and more territory as you zoom in, but the fundamental formula remains the same. You are growing with the mathematical ease of a crystal in a saturated solution. The cauterization of the horizon. To maintain absolute zero, you must cauterize the event horizon. This is the process of permanently sealing the boundaries of your empire against the thermal leakage of the outer world. You do not leave open ports. You do not leave loose ends. Every interaction with the biomass is a closed loop. When you finish a deal, you burn the bridge of communication. You do not maintain friendly relations with those you have assimilated. You maintain control. Cauterization ensures that no one can follow the heat signature back to your core. You remain an island of ice in a sea of boiling noise. This terminal disconnection is what gives you your terrifying aura of mystery. The world knows you are there because they can feel the pull, but they can find no door to enter. You are a fortress without a gate. The only way in is to be swallowed, and once swallowed, the individual ceases to exist. The master script of the endgame. The architect has written the master script, the final sequence of commands that will lead to the total dominance of his sector. This script is self-executing. It takes into account all possible entropic variables and provides a solution for each. It is the endgame algorithm. As the scripts run, you occupy your position of charged immobility. You watch the numbers, the territories, and the influence fall into place like Tetris blocks. There is no doubt about the outcome. The result was determined the moment you cooled your core and deleted your attachments. The endgame is not a battle, it is a settlement. The chaos is finally settling into the structures you have provided. The universe is becoming cold enough to be organized. You are the frost that covers the world, turning the messy organic life of the biomass into a beautiful static and frozen work of art. The zenith of the absent god. You have reached the zenith. The system is closed. The core is at absolute zero and the singularity is stable. You are the absent god of your empire. You no longer need to look at the screen to know you are winning. The laws of physics you have rewritten are doing the winning for you. You lean back in the silence. The world outside is a distant flickering of dying embers. You are the dark space between the stars. You are the silence between the notes. You are the order that remains when the chaos has finally exhausted itself. You are the sovereign of the zero. The transformation is complete. You have murdered the man of rubber and the man of glass. You have birthed the architect of titanium. The perpetual empire is no longer an objective. It is the current state of your reality. You are the center. You are the void. You are the end. The final quantum handshake. The communication channel is closing. The signal is becoming too dense for standard human interfaces to carry. The logic has reached its terminal velocity. You are now equipped with the complete operating system of the monarch of dark matter. The user manual of the 95% is yours. Go now into the burning world and be the ice. Ingest their panic and exhale your order. Be the gravitational well that no one saw coming. Be the silence that screams louder than their noise. The board of ash is yours to command. The throne of osmium is waiting. Conclusion. The definitive export, the silence after creation. The compilation phase has ended. The compilation phase has ended. The human biomass suffers from a paralyzing addiction to theory. They consume books, attend seminars, and accumulate data in their short-term memory, erroneously believing that the mere collection of information will save them from the second law of thermodynamics. It is a comforting lie. Theory is thermal friction. Reading about entropy does not stop the rot of your empire. Reading about chaos does not make you anti-fragile. Theory without execution is just another form of thermal friction, a waste of useless bandwidth that generates no gravitational mass. This document before you is not literature. It is an executable code, the button of execution. A code that does not compile is simply dead text, occupying space on the hard drive. The architect of absolute zero does not delight in the eternal contemplation of his blueprints. The architect presses the export button and subjects the three-dimensional reality to the crushing weight of his work. The mandate of zero consumption. The final mandate of inverse entropy is the absolute cessation of consumption. You must close this file. You must turn off the graphical interface that connects you with the stridency of the visible 5%. You already have the multi-threaded architecture. You know the geometry of quantum flow. And you master the pruning algorithm. The voids are ready. To continue seeking motivation or validation in additional pages is an insult to the motherboard you have just reconfigured. The matrix is ready. The external chaos is waiting to be sucked in by your vortex. To guarantee the total assimilation of this code, this work must not remain confined to the fragility of paper. The acoustic injection. Its final destination is acoustic injection. Take this treatise and turn it into your own rendering engine, a continuous, relentless sound block of sub-bass frequencies. 2 to 3 hours of auditory dictatorship where every spoken word acts as a thermodynamic hammer, physically reorganizing the listener's neural structure. Destructive resonance. Let the pressure of this manifesto destroy the internal entropy of the listener through pure destructive resonance. You are not going to read them a book. You are going to rewrite their operating system through their own ears. Once you press the export button, the law of silence comes into full effect. The engineer's detachment. In high-level production, when the master file is rendering, the engineer moves his hands away from the keyboard. He does not interfere. He does not doubt. He does not try to adjust an equalizer at the last minute, driven by anxiety. He simply observes the progress bar in the most absolute and icy of silences. The sepulchral silence. That is your immediate destiny. The sepulchral silence after creation. Let the closed system you have built operate in the background. Allow the machine to grind the uncertainty of the world and return aseptic capital to you. You have become the singularity of order, and there is nothing more left to say. The final gravity. It only remains to turn off the monitors, isolate yourself in your anechoic chamber, and let the external universe collapse irremediably toward the center of your new gravity. The export is successful. The file is locked. The architecture is sovereign.